Under a night sky filled with the moon and stars, a small family lived deep in the forest. One evening, they heard the cries of a baby. The man of the house felt uneasy and immediately grabbed his axe to investigate. This man was a hunter, skilled in tracking wild animals. Moving cautiously, he crept forward, careful not to startle any potential prey. He burst into the horse stable, where the sound seemed to originate. Yet, he found nothing suspicious inside. Ever since being diagnosed as infertile, he often heard strange noises, perhaps illusions of the mind. But when he turned around, he was stunned to see a baby lying helplessly in the hay. Without hesitation, he scooped the child up, checking for signs of life. The baby was unharmed. Overwhelmed with gratitude, the man felt a joy beyond words. Suddenly, his wife approached, asking what had happened. The man's name was Vincent, and his wife was Olena. Olena gasped upon seeing the baby in Vincent's arms, demanding to know where it came from. Vincent declared they would adopt the child as their own. Long ago, the tale goes, there lived a man with magical powers. With a mere wave of his hand, rain would end droughts. He shielded the village from external threats using his extraordinary abilities. No longer did the villagers suffer hunger or thirst. Prosperity flourished. But the man never ceased experimenting for the village's advancement. Recognizing his power, the people revered him as the Mage. This story came from a history book read by a child, a 12-year-old named Sharon who adored reading. And the man from earlier, Vincent, now 40, was Sharon's adoptive father. Vincent raised Sharon with boundless love, calling him home for dinner. Obsessed with magic, Sharon asked his father how to wield it, but Vincent could only stammer in confusion. On their walk home, Vincent joked that felling a tree or defeating a bear in one strike might count as magic. Other village children noticed Vincent and Sharon walking together. They mocked Sharon, who always carried a book, doubting whether he could even read it. Vincent overheard the children belittling his son. He was furious but forced himself to stay calm. Sharon, however, seemed unbothered by their taunts and remained happily focused on his father. Vincent planned to take Sharon to town the next day to buy his favorite fruits. Sharon was overjoyed and could hardly wait. He intended to use this opportunity to learn more about magic. The following day, they arrived at a small town called Creus. Sharon marveled at the bustling city sights. Nobles browsed extravagant clothing shops, while children laughed and snacked on treats. Vincent instructed him to wait at Old Man Martin's shop until he returned. He warned him not to disturb the nobles or wander into alleys. Sharon obeyed. Commoners rarely knew how to read or write, but Sharon could. Old Man Martin was impressed and praised him. Obsessed with magic, Sharon asked if he knew about it. Martin admitted he didn't understand magic well, but the bookstore across the street had many books on the subject. He allowed him to go, but insisted he return quickly. Sharon left his book with Martin. Curious, he peeked inside and reminisced about his youth spent reading fairy tales. But his shock grew when the book resembled a scientific journal. Meanwhile, the bookstore owner's wife slapped Sharon's hand away. She refused to let the boy touch the expensive books and shooed him out. Suddenly, a middle-aged man entered, a client discussing a book order. They were seen chatting about some books that had been ordered and would soon be sent. Sharon quickly seized the opportunity to glance at one of the books but found little information in it. He found it incredibly difficult just to read a book and wondered how his father had obtained the ones he read. Suddenly, he noticed someone carrying a box of books passing by in front of him. Curiosity piqued. Sharon decided to follow the man. To his surprise, she saw the books being carelessly discarded. They were thrown into a trash bin tucked away in a quiet corner of the city. Finally, Sharon realized where the books his father gave him came from. Sharon spotted two noble women, deep in conversation. He pondered what truly set nobles apart from commoners. Intrigued, he trailed after them as they headed toward the noble district. Of course, he was immediately stopped by the guards and shooed away. The guards questioned Sharon about his origins and parents. He claimed his father was nearby, but one guard remained skeptical. He had never seen Sharon around before. Sensing the guard's growing suspicion, he grew fearful, a bad premonition creeping in. The guard accused Sharon of being a spy sent by bandits and moved to arrest him for interrogation. Luckily, Sharon had already slipped away, leaving his jacket behind in his escape. The guard panicked and immediately began searching for him. As it turned out, Chiron was hiding in a secluded corner of a building. He hurried back to Old Man Martin, certain his father would scold him later. As he passed by a building, he overheard the voice of an old man giving a lesson about magic. From behind the wall, Chiron kept listening to the teachings being shared. The lesson emphasized that the most crucial aspect of learning magic was neither money, hard work, power, nor status, but insight. With vast insight, one could be considered a genius, mastering magic swiftly and even becoming a mage. The old man then asked for Chiron's opinion, revealing that he knew Chiron had been listening from behind the wall. Chiron was startled. How could the man detect him without even seeing him directly? He hesitated, unsure whether to run or answer. But Chiron was determined to chase his dream. He felt that if he didn't climb this wall now, he would regret it forever. With great effort, he scaled the wall. On the other side, an old man was teaching several students around Chiron's age. The man was the headmaster of the Alpheus Magic Academy, a fourth-tier mage. Chiron jumped over the wall and approached the headmaster. Other students saw Chiron's appearance and told him to leave because he wasn't a noble. Chiron was shocked. Even at the academy, status discrimination persisted, but the wise headmaster didn't mind and gestured for him to come closer, asking what had made Chiron so curious. Without hesitation, Chiron replied he wanted to see magic. He had only read about it, but had never witnessed it firsthand. Bowing deeply, Chiron earnestly begged the headmaster to show him. Delighted by his enthusiasm, the headmaster agreed to demonstrate wind magic. Suddenly, a powerful gust of wind swept through. It lifted the other students and Chiron into the air. Chiron felt both awe and fear at the same time. Panic set in as he realized he was falling, but the other students seemed to be enjoying themselves, as if playing. As he plummeted, Chiron shut his eyes, convinced it was the end. But the headmaster's magic halted his fall mid-air. The other students laughed at him. The headmaster ended the demonstration, hoping Chiron hadn't been too frightened. Instead of fear, Chiron's face shone with amazement, his thirst for magical knowledge undeniable. With fierce determination, he pleaded with the headmaster to explain how it worked. The other students frowned, deeming Chiron's boldness disrespectful, but the headmaster sensed something unusual about Chiron. It was as if he glimpsed a talent surpassing anyone else's in magic, though he wasn't entirely sure. Deciding to test him, the headmaster gave a complex explanation. Magic was a mental act, exploring the world's ultimate truths. He assumed this would be too difficult for Chiron. But Chiron suddenly countered, saying irrational truths often came closest to real ones. A stunned silence fell over the students and headmaster, their surprise unconcealed. The headmaster, now excited, asked if Chiron had read that in a book. Chiron denied it. He'd noticed how dismissed ideas from many thinkers later became new truths. The headmaster was deeply satisfied, while the other students remained confused. Chiron boldly asked what he must do to learn magic. The headmaster recognized his brilliance and independent research, traits of a true mage. Yet he couldn't help regretting Chiron's commoner status. He instructed a female student to demonstrate, telling her to use Spirit Zone. Moments later, she entered the Spirit Zone. The headmaster asked her to guess the number of coins in his hand. Without hesitation, she correctly answered 6. The headmaster explained that a focused mage could perceive everything around them, even counting leaves on a tree. This ability, Spirit Zone, revealed the world's hidden truths. Chiron grasped the concept instantly, confident he could do it. The headmaster advised practicing in solitude, first sensing one's existence, then erasing it. Only then would a new world unfold. Chiron understood. Without sensing oneself, erasure was impossible. Impressed, the headmaster suggested he try right there. Chiron closed his eyes, concentrating. He focused on his own existence. What is me? The brain? No, the brain is just an organ. Sensations couldn't be confined to that concept. It wasn't about definition, but feeling. One by one, Chiron mentally stripped away layers of self. Only his heightened awareness remained. Slowly, he opened his eyes. The headmaster asked what he'd felt. Tense and wide-eyed, Chiron heard everything around him. The students mocked him. Of course he'd hear sounds if he just stood there. The headmaster, assuming failure, encouraged him to keep practicing. Then he left with the other students, abandoning Chiron under the tree. Still, the headmaster lamented Chiron's commoner status. Given his rare potential, Chiron climbed the academy wall to leave, but his hands were clammy, his breath ragged, his expression one of disbelief. He had succeeded. It turned out Chiron had truly succeeded in entering the spirit zone. He could clearly see the massive tree, its leaves falling gently, hidden behind the academy's walls. He also spotted birds soaring freely above the city. He could even feel the planet he lived on from the perspective of outer space. It was as if he had melted into the world itself. The overwhelming experience brought him to tears. As he ran back, Chiron felt as though, in that moment, his soul had truly left his body. He became an infinite existence, merging with the consciousness of the cosmos. Distracted, he accidentally collided with a man. The impact sent him tumbling sideways, crashing into nearby objects. He quickly tried to apologize, but Chiron only then realized he had run into a narrow, deserted alley where several street thugs now surrounded him. One of them, furious, grabbed him by the collar. The thug deliberately demanded compensation for Chiron's carelessness. Suddenly, a voice called out from behind them. A young, noble girl with striking red hair stood there, her demeanor regal. The thugs recognized her, Amy, but insisted they would teach Chiron a lesson. One kicked Chiron in the stomach, sending him sprawling to the ground. They ordered him to call his mother and make her pay for the damages. The insult to his mother ignited Chiron's fury, his expression darkening. The thug responded by kicking his head, mocking him for daring to act tough. Amy intervened, asking if Chiron was all right. She crouched in front of him, but Chiron insisted he hadn't done anything wrong. The thugs sneered, threatening to beat him and sell him to the next village, sending Chiron into a panic. Instead of helping, Amy mused about checking Chiron for defects to see if he'd fetch a good price as a slave. Misunderstanding her, the thugs began tearing at Chiron's clothes. Amy frowned in confusion. She had only meant to admire his face, finding him handsome. She grew uneasy seeing the terrifying look in Chiron's eyes. She'd only intended to bully him a little before letting him go. A silent hope crossed her mind. Hope he don't lose his sanity. Then, Chiron's emotions surged violently. His senses expanded. He could feel the flies near the thugs, the birds perched on cardboard boxes, even the rats scurrying in the streets. Unconsciously, he had fully activated the spirit zone. His heightened perception made time seem to slow around him. A flashback struck, the academy headmaster using wind magic. The sensation was so vivid, as if he were the headmaster himself. Memories, experiences, the very feel of wind magic flooded Chiron's mind. His expression twisted into one of lethal intent. Wind magic erupted from Chiron, swirling violently around him and hurling the thugs into the air. Though brief, the spell's force was enough to send them all flying. One by one, they crashed back down, leaving them severely injured. Some with broken bones, others unconscious. Amy approached Chiron, demanding to know his true identity. Chiron didn't answer, still in shock at what he'd done. Suddenly, noise erupted as a crowd gathered, staring at the scene. Amy swiftly leaped from rooftop to escape. Chiron marveled at her agility but had no time to dwell. Guards were closing in. Knowing no one would believe a commoner's explanation, Chiron fled too. As he ran, he called out for his father, feeling the world's icy indifference. That evening, in the Karmas family's first-tier noble estate, Amy's father scolded her for returning home earlier than usual. Ignoring him, Amy walked straight to her room. Her father was puzzled. Normally she'd argue back, but today she was eerily quiet. Then, abruptly, she spoke. She wanted him to introduce her to a magic instructor. Winter had arrived, and a beautiful blanket of snow covered the yard of Chiron's home. His father searched for Chiron, but his mother mentioned he had gone to the forest to chop wood. Vincent decided to follow him there and bring him back home. As he walked, Vincent recalled the time he took Chiron to the city, how the boy had returned later, claiming he'd only gotten lost. But seeing him sob uncontrollably, Vincent sensed something deeper had happened. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, Chiron swung his axe against a tree. He looked exhausted, as if the task weighed more than just physical labor. The magic he'd used to defeat bandits before eluded him now. He couldn't grasp the knowledge needed to summon it again, but he could consciously enter the spirit zone at will. There, his perception expanded beyond human limits. He could feel every inch of the tree simultaneously, its grooves, its pulse. Suddenly, a bright glow caught his attention within the trunk, indefinable but undeniable. With a powerful swing, he struck the glowing spot. The tree splintered into pieces, collapsing instantly. Chiron stared, stunned. He realized was the magic his father had spoken of. Unbeknownst to him, Vincent watched from afar, equally shocked. It was a thunder strike, a technique that shattered trees with one precise hit, echoing like thunder. Chiron gathered the logs to carry home. Vincent's heart swelled with pride at his son's perseverance. 3 years passed. Autumn leaves crunched under Chiron's boots as he stood atop a freshly felled tree. He yanked his axe free from the trunk. Placing a hand on another tree, he sensed its weak point through the spirit zone. One decisive strike split it apart. He'd mastered Thunderstrike. The Academy headmaster's words echoed in his mind. The spirit zone unlocks new worlds. He hadn't expected to experience it so vividly. After bundling the wood, Chiron headed home. In the yard, a noble's white horse grazed on weeds beside an ornate carriage. Curiosity prickled. Which noble would visit their home? Inside, he greeted Vincent and Olina, then noticed a middle-aged man seated across from them. The stranger introduced himself as Temarin, a steward from House Ogent. Chiron bowed respectfully. Temarin had come specifically to inspect him, scrutinizing his physique. He asked whether Chiron could read. Chiron ignored the question, demanding to know the purpose of the visit. Satisfied with Chiron's strength and literacy, Temarin offered a job at the Ogent estate. Chiron hesitated, bewildered by the abrupt proposal. Temarin explained the job involved sorting over 10,000 books to be transferred to the main library. At the word library, Chiron's mind raced. This was a chance to study magic. Noble houses hoarded invaluable texts. However, Temarin attached a grim condition. If Chiron disclosed anything, his family would be killed. Chiron finally understood his parents' somber expressions. The pay, however, matched the risk. Vincent stood abruptly, protesting. He wanted Chiron to chase dreams, not Ogent's gold. Temarin sneered that commoners like them could have no other motives. Vincent's voice shook with fury. He'd recommended Chiron for the books, not the coin. He remembered Chiron's childhood obsession, how the boy had taught himself to read after learning mere basics from Olina. That book-crazed glint in his eyes made Vincent wonder if noble blood ran in his veins. So he'd sought Temarin, begging for a chance for Chiron to read. Trembling with rage, Vincent growled that they didn't need Temarin's money. Then he roared, throwing Temarin out of the house. Upon hearing his expulsion, Temarin felt an urgent need to leave the scene immediately. However, Chiron approached him and calmly agreed to the job offer. Meanwhile, Vincent shouted in protest, desperately trying to dissuade his son from this decision. Temarin hesitated, asking Chiron once more if he understood the gravity of the consequences. Chiron reassured him, vowing not to reveal anything or blame Temarin if things went awry. Relieved, Temarin smiled and promised to return for him in a week. He quietly hoped Chiron wouldn't change his mind when the time came. Vincent continued pleading, warning of the unbearable risks, but Chiron, touched, thanked his father instead, calling this opportunity a gift. The two embraced, their longing and sorrow mingling before the departure. Olina wept too, her tears a mix of pride and heartache, as she watched her son step into adulthood. A week later, a servant from the Ogent family arrived with a contract for Vincent to sign. The moment the ink dried, the servant hastily snatched the document and ushered Chiron toward a noble's carriage. Chiron glanced back one last time, memorizing Vincent's face. Inside the carriage, Chiron sat in silence, his thoughts lingering on his parents. He activated his spirit zone, sensing their presence afar. Through its haze, he saw them weeping as they bid him farewell. Clenching his fists, he swore to survive, to learn everything he could, and to return alive no matter what. The Ogent family resided in Thormia Kingdom's Kriya city, renowned for their mastery of swordsmanship. Their patriarch was a fourth-tier knight, and the entire strength of Krias flowed from the Ogent lineage. Soon, the carriage arrived at the Ogent estate. The servant beside Chiron mistook his awe for fear, as the boy gaped at the grand manor. They passed sprawling gardens, a towering fountain with a horse statue at its center, symbols of the Ogent family's valor, the steed and the sword. The servant led him to a tower-like building where staff lived and worked. There, Temeran greeted Chiron warmly and explained his duties for the next 2 years. As they entered a vast library, shelves of pristine books stretched endlessly. To Chiron, it felt like stepping into heaven, and Chiron had to sort all the books here. Temeran handed over the book data that needed sorting and instructed Chiron to ask if there was anything he didn't understand. Chiron would start his work tomorrow morning. For now, he could rest. The next morning at the Ogent family library, Chiron had begun his task of sorting all the books. He finally understood why only one person was allowed to handle this job. He realized the information and knowledge within the books were all interconnected. And what tied all this knowledge together was history. History was the origin of all knowledge, the backbone of every piece of information accumulated over the years into a single thread. By understanding history, he could learn other disciplines faster. He planned to read all those books within 2 years. Suddenly, Temeran visited him. Chiron quickly closed the book he was reading. He didn't want Temeran to know he was studying those texts. Temeran praised his excellent work and asked if he was working late again today. Chiron confirmed it. Temeran scolded him, warning him not to overwork himself, since no one would take responsibility for his health. Then, Temeran suddenly noticed something. He approached Chiron, who began to panic but forced himself to stay calm. Chiron wondered if he had been caught reading the books, but Temeran only reprimanded him about dressing neatly. He also told him to shave his now long hair. Chiron sighed in relief, grateful he hadn't been found out. Happily, he agreed to follow Temeran's suggestions. That night, Chiron was working late again, reading books. The more he read, the harder it became to comprehend. He struggled to digest the historical knowledge about the 7 kingdoms. As he pondered, drowsiness crept in. He tried forcing himself to read just one more line, but his body refused to cooperate, and he ended up falling asleep right at the desk. Unbeknownst to him, Temeran had been watching. He had waited for Chiron to fall asleep so he could check what he was reading. After seeing the book's historical topic, Temeran smirked faintly, amused that Chiron would overwork himself just for history books. Initially, Temeran would have forbidden him if they were practical manuals, but he felt relieved. Chiron was just a dreamer with grand ambitions, nothing more. 3 months had passed since Chiron began working for the Ogent family. A noble's servant approached wanting to borrow a book from the library. Chiron scolded him for failing to return his previous borrowed book, making the servant visibly uncomfortable. The servant explained that nobles didn't care about missing books, but servants would face the consequences. Chiron silently agreed with the servant's assessment. As the servant took his leave, Chiron bowed respectfully in farewell. Chiron couldn't care less about the noble's opinions. All he'd ever wanted was a simple, peaceful life. No sooner had he thought this than a man burst into the library, cursing loudly. Chiron jumped in surprise, quickly scanning the situation. The angry young man turned out to be Rian Ogent, the family's youngest son. Rian rushed to Chiron, urgently telling him not to reveal his hiding place. He immediately ducked under a nearby table. Moments later, an older man stormed in, demanding Rian come out. The man gruffly asked Chiron if he'd seen the boy. Chiron politely countered by asking the man's identity instead of answering. With visible irritation, the man identified himself as Rian's sword instructor, threatening to punish Chiron too if he interfered. Chiron felt trapped, but made a quick decision. He pointed directly to Rian's hiding spot under the adjacent table. The instructor immediately dragged Rian out for discipline. Chiron watched wide-eyed as the older man effortlessly hauled Rian away by the collar. Rian hung limply like a scruffed kitten, unable to resist his teacher's grip. As he was being dragged off, Rian shot Sharon a look promising revenge for this betrayal. The sword instructor held authority even above the family head, leaving Sharon no choice but to comply. Later, whispers spread through the manor. Rian had been taken to the mountains for special training. 1 month later, Sharon remained engrossed in books, having devoured 82 volumes in just 4 months. As he suspected, the initial difficulty understanding texts had given way to effortless comprehension. Noticing repetitive information across books, he questioned whether continuing history texts was worthwhile. But one historical pattern stood out. Scholars proposed theories while mages proved them. This realization crystallized his ambition to master both roles simultaneously. Only then would he become a true mage. Suddenly, the library doors slammed open as Rian stormed in, shouting accusations at Sharon. For the past month, he had endured what felt like hell, and now he was determined to seek revenge. Sharon asked if Rian had come all this way just for that. Still fuming, Rian confirmed it with a sharp nod. Sharon hadn't expected Rian to be this stubborn. From Rian's perspective, he trusted Sharon enough to ask for help, only to have that trust met with betrayal. He despised cowards who played such games. Sharon denied being called a traitor, but this only fueled Rian's anger. If Sharon had refused from the start, things wouldn't have escalated. Seeing no point in arguing, Sharon asked what he could do to make amends. But Sharon's calm demeanor puzzled Rian. A servant in his position should have been begging for mercy, trembling in fear. Rian smirked darkly, convinced Sharon was looking down on him too. He ordered Sharon to stop talking and follow him without another word. Rian led Sharon to the duel arena. Sharon considered just taking Rian's hits to avoid worsening the situation. Then, out of nowhere, Rian hurled a wooden sword at him. Sharon caught it but stared in confusion. What was Rian planning? Rian wasn't a coward who'd abuse his noble status to beat someone defenseless. He preferred a fair duel. Sharon tried to explain he hadn't betrayed Rian, but Rian accused him outright. When someone begged for help, Sharon had turned his back without hesitation. Rian took a swordsman's stance. To keep it fair, he'd let Sharon strike first. 3 free attacks. Sharon racked his brain, scrambling for a way out. After a tense pause, an idea formed. He launched his first strike, swinging the wooden sword downward with all his strength. Rian blocked it effortlessly, the impact sending Sharon staggering back. The sheer gap in their strength shocked him, but he refused to quit. Gritting his teeth, Sharon tightened his grip. He attacked again with another overhead swing. Again, Rian deflected it like swatting away a fly. Rian grinned. Only one attack left before he could finally unleash his own assault. For the final blow, Sharon entered the spirit zone. He struck with the same motion, aiming for Rian's sword. Once more, Rian blocked it, but then came a crack. Rian, too eager to counter, didn't notice his sword splintering until it shattered completely in his hands. The broken weapon left Rian speechless, his fury frozen in disbelief. Rian stood his ground, watching as the duel took an unexpected turn. No one expected Sharon's wooden sword to snap, but then again, that had been his plan all along. He hadn't imagined that the Thunderstrike technique he'd practiced would come in handy now. Meanwhile, Rian just stood there, utterly confused by the situation. With a dazed expression, Rian asked Sharon where he'd learned swordsmanship. Sharon explained it wasn't swordsmanship at all, it was Thunderstrike. But Rian only grew more bewildered by the answer. Sharon clarified that it was just a wood-chopping skill he picked up because of his weak physique. Rian's frustration grew as he realized Sharon had beaten him with something as simple as tree cutting, while he'd spent 15 years mastering the sword. The memory flashed in his mind. His own sibling, who'd wielded a similar technique called sword smash. That very ability had crushed Rian in their duel years ago. Ever since that loss, the rest of the family had looked down on him. And now, history repeated itself. He saw his sibling's genius reflected in Sharon, and it infuriated him. Rian snapped, shouting that he refused to accept this duel's outcome. He drew his real sword, then handed it to Sharon. Seeing Sharon's sword smash, Rian demanded a proper rematch, one with real blades. He gave Sharon a month to prepare. They'd meet again in this arena, armed for real combat. Sharon panicked. He knew nothing about actual swordsmanship. He begged Rian to call it off, insisting he was just a lumberjack, not a swordsman. But that was exactly why Rian gave him time. If Sharon could mimic sword smash just by cutting trees, he could learn the real thing. Rian warned him not to run. He'd hunt Sharon down no matter where he went. The next day, Sharon slumped in frustration, replaying the duel in his head. But slowly, the pieces clicked into place. The Ogent family had 3 sons and 1 daughter, all with their signature black and blue hair. The eldest was a 6th-tier swordsman. The second, a gifted musician. Their only daughter. The third child, Rai Ogent, was the prodigy who defeated Rian long ago. And then there was Rian. The servants' gossip confirmed it. The whole palace knew he was the talentless one. Sharon regretted using Thunder Smash. Maybe he should have just taken the hit and avoided this mess. But he wasn't that weak-willed. His parents, Vincent and Olina, were waiting for him to return safely. He'd fight his hardest. He scavenged for sword manuals, relying on his mountain-forged stamina to compensate for his lack of skill. He'd push himself to the limit. That was all he could do. Meanwhile, Rian was training relentlessly. His sword instructor stood nearby, watching closely. The instructor was both pleased and puzzled. Usually, Rian complained or slacked off. Now, he seemed driven. But Rian scoffed at the drills, calling them unworthy of being called training. The instructor bristled, shocked by his sudden arrogance. Rian barked that his feet were still planted and he could keep going. The instructor grew suspicious. Something had changed in Rian. He wondered if Rai's latest achievements had triggered this. But that didn't quite fit. Schema, the instructor mused, was the ability to sense and command every part of one's body, a polar opposite to a mage's spirit zone. Masters of schema could even manipulate their cells at will. Sharon, alone in his quarters, attempted to enter schema state. He closed his eyes, focusing inward. He tried rejecting spirit zone principles, aiming for total bodily awareness, but failed. The clash with his spirit zone training was too severe. Swordsmanship would have to rely on his existing skills, so he practiced swings alone, blade cutting the air. Back at the training grounds, Rian's instructor ordered him to stop overexerting himself. Rian ignored him. He kept striking until his hands bled. Furious he couldn't achieve schema. The instructor's concern deepened. Finally, he forced Rian to halt and rest. Rian obeyed, tossing his practice stick aside. As the instructor treated his wounds, he muttered about Rian's recklessness. Then came the blunt verdict: "You lack talent." Rian seethed at the jab. But then, something shifted. The instructor added, "Yet geniuses fear only one thing: those who outwork them and defy every obstacle." Such people, he said, were a genius's true rivals. Rian's anger melted into grim satisfaction. That might have been the best compliment he'd ever received. Fueled by the words, his determination burned hotter. This duel would be his victory, no matter the cost. Sharon was still practicing alone with his sword, the rhythmic swings cutting through the quiet air. He closed his eyes, focusing deeply, visualizing enemies attacking from every possible angle. So far, he'd managed to parry and counterstrikes from 8 different directions, each movement sharpening his reflexes. This wasn't just ordinary training. He was pushing his limits using the Spirit Zone's projections, a technique that blurred the line between illusion and reality. When the session ended, his sword clattered to the ground. Then, out of nowhere, he burst into laughter, wild, almost unhinged, as if he'd cracked some cosmic joke. It hit him then. Swordsmanship, like magic, was an endless realm. There was always another layer, another peak to chase. Picking up his blade, he whispered an apology to Vincent and Olina. A quiet doubt lingered, not sure he even make it back to them alive. The night of the duel arrived, the arena bathed in the glare of spotlights, turning the battlefield into a stage under the stars. Rian stood waiting at the center, his posture relaxed, but his eyes alert. Rian watched as Sharon arrived, sword in hand, and gestured impatiently for the duel to begin. Even Rian had to admit, Sharon's aura had changed. A month ago, he'd been raw potential. Now, Intensity rolled off him in waves. The growth was obscene. How had he improved this much without a mentor? That thought pissed Rian off. No one climbed this fast alone. Gritting his teeth, he lunged forward, blade flashing. Sharan knew the gap between their skill was vast, but the spirit zone hummed in his veins, tracing the path of Rian's attack before it even came. He sidestepped, the strike grazing empty air. Rian froze, questioning whether Sharan had intentionally avoided the attack by a narrow margin. He wondered if this guy wasn't afraid of getting skewered. The truth was that Sharan had been terrified, but he had learned that fear was merely his brain conjuring illusions, potential futures, not inevitabilities. If people stopped imagining the next moment, he mused, no one would hesitate to jump off a cliff. Rian realized then, it wasn't that Sharan didn't fear death. He had locked away his emotions entirely. Not that Rian cared. Fearless himself, he twisted mid-charge, striking from the side, only for Sharan to deflect it. Steel, ringing against steel. Attack after attack rained down, yet every single one met the same fate. Parried, countered, denied. Even so, Rian's training experience was no joke. He attacked fiercely, pushing Sharan to the brink of exhaustion. Rian swung his sword swiftly and hard from the side. A brutal, unpredictable strike. The slash cut deep into Sharan's chest. Shock flashed through him. He hadn't even seen the attack coming. At that moment, Sharan realized death could claim him at any second. Rian raised his sword high, muscles coiled for a decisive blow. He brought it down with crushing force, but Sharan wasn't idle. Ducking at the last moment, he barely escaped. He leaped back, putting what he hoped was a safe distance between them. Sharan's breath came ragged. Fatigue weighed on him like armor. Rian gave no quarter, pressing forward with relentless strikes. Sharan blocked desperately, each parry draining him further. Clutching his wound, Sharan steadied himself. Just survive a little longer. Rian advanced again, eyes locked on Sharan. This would be the final attack. But Sharan faltered, confused as Rian's blade came from an unexpected angle. He'd assumed Rian would strike overhead with full force, a move that would have ended him. After a split-second analysis, Sharan saw it, Rian's flaw. The guy had zero natural talent for swordsmanship. A plan ignited. Defense was pointless. He'd exploit Rian's weakness instead. Rian jumped, sword arcing sideways, but Sharan was ready. Surprise flickered across Rian's face. He'd thought Sharan was spent. Now Sharan attacked, delivering simple, brutal slashes. No technique, just raw survival. Yet Rian struggled to block even these. His form crumbled under pressure. Suddenly, a memory stabbed at Rian. The condescending smiles of his siblings, their mocking voices. His calm shattered. A furious roar tore from his throat. He launched a wild counterattack, but Sharan deflected it effortlessly. Rian's movements turned frenzied, his strikes unhinged. Sharan's mind raced. He couldn't predict the chaotic swings anymore. Then, wham! A vicious upward slash shot toward him. Panic spiked in Sharan. The speed was unreal. Suddenly, a sword went flying through the air. It landed in the middle of the arena, a clear sign that someone had lost the duel. Sharan stood there, exhausted but alive, his breath ragged. Rian, on the other hand, hung his head in disbelief, unable to process what had just happened. Against all odds, Sharan had won. His blade now pointed directly at Rian, rewinding to the moment their swords were about to clash. Sharan had shifted his grip in an instant. With a powerful strike from the side, he knocked Rian's sword clean out of his hand. Rian still couldn't wrap his head around Sharan's identity. Wasn't he just a quiet librarian who spent his days buried in books? Meanwhile, Sharan was trembling, his earlier confidence replaced by raw fear. The look on Rian's face was anything but satisfied. Sharan thought it was over. After all, Rian was the proud heir of a powerful family. But then, to everyone's surprise, Rian openly admitted defeat. He was frustrated, yes, but unlike before, he didn't make excuses. He accepted the loss. Rian even told Sharan to go ahead and kill him. as if there was nothing left to say. That set Chiron off. He snapped, demanding if Rian was joking. He ranted that killing Rian would mean his own death, too. What was the point? Rian awkwardly argued that this was a fair duel, and they'd both staked their lives on it. Wasn't death the expected outcome? Chiron exploded. He never wanted to fight in the first place. He'd just been trying to survive. He accused Rian of hiding from training, then blaming him when caught. He didn't stop there. He mocked Rian's noble pride, pointing out how he'd put his subordinate in an impossible position. Those sharp words cut deep, hitting Rian right where it hurt. Finally, Rian realized their perspectives were worlds apart. To him, Chiron seemed cowardly, and he'd just wanted an honorable duel. But from Chiron's side, it looked like Rian was trying to erase him in some revenge plot. Chiron collapsed to the ground, relieved just to be alive. He'd genuinely thought he was going to die. Rian watched him, confused. He'd expected mutual respect, a warrior's camaraderie. Instead, Chiron was sitting there crying, nothing like the fierce fighter from moments ago. Rian knew Chiron was a genius, but unlike his siblings, he didn't laugh. Even fought him seriously, with everything he had. So Rian stepped forward, introducing himself properly, a sign of genuine respect. Chiron blinked, thrown off by the sudden formality, as Rian extended a hand. And just like that, Rian asked to be friends. The next day, servants were hauling sorted books to the new library. Temeran praised him. He'd already categorized 7,000 volumes. Chiron thanked him politely before seeing him off. Then, he returned to sorting, back to his usual routine. Secretly, he was grateful. The fight with Rian had strengthened his spirit zone. Out of nowhere, Rian appeared beside him, eyeing the books. Had his family even read these? He wondered. Chiron confirmed it. He often saw the family head and other members visiting the library. After getting closer to Rian, Chiron realized Rian was a funny and enthusiastic guy, despite his overly proud attitude. Seeing Rian carelessly toss a book aside, Chiron scolded him since he would be the one dead if something went wrong. But Rian told him not to worry. He'd protect Chiron no matter what. Chiron sarcastically remarked that he'd feel safer if Rian just did nothing at all. Rian also admitted he wanted to study at the library, claiming his sword instructor had recommended it. But in reality, he was bored out of his mind, squirming around like a kid begging for candy. 10 minutes later, they were sitting on one of the library tables, with Chiron sternly telling Rian to actually focus on studying. Rian wondered if Chiron, who wanted to become a mage, really needed to read that many books. Chiron nodded. Even after going through 600 history books, he still felt like it wasn't enough. Rian was genuinely impressed. Chiron had managed to read so much. As he watched Chiron absorbed in a book, Rian couldn't help but feel Chiron seemed more mature than him, despite being the same age. Rian then noticed a book discussing duel outcomes between mages and swordsmen. Without hesitation, Rian called the topic boring. Chiron, of course, protested. He found it fascinating. They argued fiercely, with Chiron trying to snatch the book from Rian, curious about the author's perspective. Suddenly, Rai appeared from behind the door and declared the swordsman would win. Seeing Rai, Chiron immediately bowed in respectful greeting. Rian asked where Rai got that answer from, suspecting Rai only said swordsman because he was one himself. Rai coolly explained that the answer was obvious if you considered the power dynamics across the continent. Rian scoffed, saying Rai only looked at it from a military standpoint. They were debating individual combat. Ignoring his foolish little brother's opinion, Rai turned to Chiron and asked for his thoughts. Chiron hesitated. Should he answer honestly or play it safe? He couldn't read Rai's intentions. But in the end, Chiron chose honesty. If a swordsman and mage are of equal skill, the swordsman would struggle to win once the mage enters the spirit zone. Just as Chiron was about to elaborate, Rai cut him off, disagreeing sharply. He strode forward and declared loudly, the mage would lose. Rai then brought up the armor set of the 5 gods, a legendary artifact capable of disrupting a mage's spirit zone. Chiron fell silent, stunned by the revelation. It was explained that fighting inside a mage's spirit zone was no ordinary battle. The experience was likened to facing a swarm of sharks in the depths of the ocean, overwhelming, and deadly. But there was one thing that could disrupt the water's ripples and throw those sharks into confusion. That thing was anti-magic. If a spirit zone couldn't penetrate anti-magic, defeating the mage became effortless. Though this was still just a theory, anti-magic worked in waves. No matter how much money invest into it, its effectiveness wouldn't increase. Even Yakra, a master of wave manipulation, could only harness 65% of the artifact's anti-magic potential. The irony is, very people who created anti-magic were mages themselves. Rian couldn't understand why mages would develop something that weakened their own kind. Rai scoffed, stating the obvious: money. Mages were eager to prove their usefulness, even if it meant selling out their weaknesses. Rai looked down on mages as useless sellouts, willing to trade their flaws for profit. Rian bristled at his brother's harsh words, but Shiran cut in, calmly stating that this was the essence of being a mage. Rai blinked, thrown off by Shiran's cryptic remark. As Rai himself had said, anti-magic was created by mages to regulate magic in critical areas, ensuring safety. It was also used in magic academies for training, a selfless innovation, born of intelligence, meant to better the world. Rai fell silent, frustration simmering but no retort coming. Watching his brother's irritated expression, Rian struggled to hide a satisfied smirk, which only made Rai angrier. Rai stubbornly insisted swordsmen would never lose to mages, but his stormy exit betrayed that Shiran's words had struck a nerve. Shiran let out a relieved sigh as Rai left, while Rian grinned in quiet victory. For a moment, Shiran had genuinely thought he was about to die. Rian praised him, amazed. It was the first time he'd ever seen Rai so thoroughly rattled. Time flew. 6 months passed in what felt like an instant. A servant reported Shiran's progress to Tamaran. To Tamaran's shock, Shiran had completed his task 6 months ahead of schedule. The servant urged him not to let go of such a valuable asset, but Tamaran dismissed the suggestion, shooing the servant away. Deep in thought, Tamaran lingered on the subject of Shiran. Meanwhile, Shiran sat in the library, flipping through a book. Closing it, he reflected on everything he'd endured over the past year and a half. Relief and joy washed over him. His duty was finally ending, and soon he'd return to his parents. Suddenly, Rian burst in, having heard Shiran was leaving. Shiran confirmed it. There were no more books left here for him to read. Rian congratulated Shiran, impressed that he'd managed to finish every book in the library. Shiran surprised Rian by asking to visit his family's estate before leaving. Unexpected, since Shiran usually kept their friendship hidden. Normally, Shiran avoided drawing attention to their bond. Rian agreed, leading him inside. The house was empty, the rest of the family gone for the day. After a short walk, they arrived at the Ojent residence. The manor felt eerily quiet to Shiran, with only a few servants shuffling about their tasks. Rian guided Shiran to his private room. Shiran mistook it for a training space, cluttered with weapons and equipment, before realizing it was just Rian's chaotic bedroom. Rian slumped, frustration written all over his face. Shiran, meanwhile, looked downright smug. They'd been playing card games, and Rian had lost every round. Rian accused Shiran of cheating with Spirit Zone tricks. Shiran laughed it off, teasing that Rian's expressions were as easy to read as a child's. He explained how observing an opponent's movements could reveal their intentions. But the advice only left Rian more confused, highlighting how clueless he was. Shiran added that if Rian ever grasped the concept, he might reach schema-level skill. Rian nodded vaguely, half understanding, half lost. Shiran's eyes landed on an intriguing fiction book, and he considered borrowing it. But Rian had already dozed off, mentally exhausted. Bored, Shiran wandered the halls alone. Then, the sound of a piano, hauntingly beautiful, caught his attention. The music led him to a room where a blue-haired girl played with effortless grace. Reina Ojent, the family's piano prodigy, glanced over her shoulder mid-melody. She turned toward the door and asked Shiran what he thought of her playing. Shiran stiffened, embarrassed at being caught eavesdropping. He fumbled through awkward praise, calling her performance remarkable. Reina smiled warmly, introducing herself since they'd never met. Shiran did the same. After exchanging names, Reina asked if he'd ever played piano before. Shiran admitted he hadn't. He recalled Rian's warning. "Reina's the worst of all my siblings. Reina patted the seat beside her, offering to teach him. The invitation made Chiron's palms sweat. He wasn't sure if he should run or comply. Reina gently calmed the visibly nervous Chiron, assuring him that no one would dare cause trouble for him there. Her words left Chiron feeling cornered, unable to refuse Reina's offer. Eventually, he sat beside her as Reina enthusiastically explained the basics of piano playing. She instructed him to press the same chord repeatedly. Chiron obeyed, but then, hesitantly, he asked if he could try playing on his own. He apologized in advance if it sounded awful, but Reina encouraged him with a smile. Tentatively, Chiron began playing, relying entirely on instinct. Reina's eyes widened as she listened. The melody wasn't what she expected. It wasn't perfect. In fact, every note was wrong. Yet, Chiron showed no hesitation, leaving Reina too stunned to interrupt. Strangely, the chaotic tune eerily resembled the piece she had played earlier. Chiron fell into deep concentration, fingers moving as if possessed. Unconsciously, he entered the spirit zone, his keystrokes syncing with his hearing and raw intuition. The music grew more precise, note by note, as if correcting itself mid-air. Reina was floored. She'd never met someone with talent rivaling her own. Chiron's playing became faster, smoother, as if he and the piano had merged into one. Reina watched, mesmerized. How could someone this gifted be just a servant? Abruptly, Chiron snapped back to reality, stopping with a flustered apology. Before Reina could respond, Rian's irritated shout cut through the room. He'd been disturbed by the racket. Rian's annoyed expression shifted to shock the moment he noticed Chiron standing there, and he demanded to know what the latter was doing in that place. Reina found herself puzzled by their apparent familiarity, wondering if the two had known each other before this moment. Chiron panicked, terrified their secret friendship would be exposed. Defying all expectations, Rian casually acknowledged Chiron as his friend. Without hesitation, Chiron's knees nearly gave way in panic at Rian's unexpected admission, but the young lord simply waved off his distress, casually remarking that while Reina might have a terrible personality, she wouldn't make an issue of their friendship. To everyone's surprise, Reina stepped closer with genuine warmth in her eyes, expressing sincere delight that her brother had found such an interesting friend in Chiron. She then asked Chiron what he'd felt while playing earlier. He didn't answer, too baffled by her indifference to a noble fraternizing with a commoner. Flustered, Chiron immediately jumped to Reina's defense, protesting that she couldn't possibly have a terrible personality when she was both beautiful and kind, completely missing Rian's sarcastic jab. Rian rolled his eyes and warned Chiron not to be deceived by her lovely appearance, quipping that his sister was actually a wicked witch who'd devour him alive if he dropped his guard for even a second. Reina sighed at Rian's childishness, but admitted she was happy he'd found a friend like Chiron, even calling the Chiron adorable. Rian smirked and suggested Reina liked Chiron so much, she might as well adopt him into their noble family and be done with it. Reina froze. Since when did Rian approve of a commoner getting close to her? But Rian sarcastically clarified that it wasn't his sister who was valuable here, it was Chiron. Before he could finish his sentence, Reina grabbed his collar. What followed was a brutal beating that left Rian begging for mercy. When Rian finally caught his breath, he asked why Reina had returned home. She explained that Rai was taking his certification exam, and she'd only come back to escort him. The news visibly shocked Rian. He hadn't realized the gap between his abilities and Rai's was that vast. Rian elaborated that license certifications were internationally recognized credentials for mages and swordsmen who met elite standards, honored across the entire continent. Only 30 candidates would be selected from thousands of annual applicants. There were also non-certified licenses, like those granted to graduates of royal-approved academies like Alpheus Magic Academy. Graduates typically receive 10th-tier mage rankings upon completion. Rian's shoulders slumped as the weight of his slow progress settled on him. Reina ruffled his hair affectionately before excusing herself to prepare dinner. She bid Chiron farewell with a smile that danced between sweet and teasing. Chiron stammered out a goodbye in return. As he watched her leave, he wondered if fate would ever truly bring them together again after her departure tomorrow. Once Reina was out of earshot, Sharon nervously asked Rian if she has boyfriend. Rian nearly choked on air at the audacity of the question, but instead of anger, mischief sparked in his eyes. He sprinted after Reina before Sharon could stop him. At the top of his lungs, he repeated every word of Sharon's private inquiry. A horrified Sharon tackled him, clamping a hand over his mouth. Reina flushed crimson, ordering nearby servants to pay no mind to their antics. Unbeknownst to them, a resentful servant had witnessed everything, one who particularly despised Sharon's rising status. The man immediately summoned Temeran to the office. Meanwhile, Rian was training swordsmanship with his instructor. As usual, the instructor marveled at Rian's relentless enthusiasm. A panting servant interrupted, relaying Reina's urgent summons. Rian barely glanced up until Sharon's in mortal danger. The servant's words made Rian spit out his drink in panic. He'd assumed Sharon had already left for home. The servant explained Sharon had been apprehended after head butler reported his inappropriate closeness to the family. Rian bolted toward the manor only for his instructor to block the exit, leaving him utterly bewildered. Inside the Ogent residence, Sharon knelt before the entire family, head bowed. The family head's voice was glacial as he pronounced the execution order. Reina tried to speak up about something related to Sharon, her voice trembling with urgency. But the family head dismissed her outright, coldly stating all the evidence was already documented. The family head offered one final chance, if Sharon had anything left to say. Sharon simply asked what would happen to Rian afterward, his tone eerily calm. The servants exchanged baffled glances. Shouldn't he be begging for his life instead? Reina was stunned. Even facing execution, Sharon was worried about Rian. The family head's face darkened. A noble, he sneered, shouldn't care about commoners. Sharon smiled, serene. He admitted he was Rian's friend, and always would be, even in death. A ripple of shock ran through the servants. The family head's fury erupted. Such insolence couldn't be tolerated. He ordered Temeran, the head servant, to act immediately and to silence any leaks. Reina lunged forward, pleading, but her father ignored her. One servant hesitated, muttering this was excessive. The others just obeyed. No one would risk their neck for a commoner. Suddenly, Rian burst in, shouting for them to stop. Reina's eyes lit up with relief. Rian roared, demanding who dared lay hands on his friend without his consent. His father admitted it casually, as if discussing the weather. Rian argued Sharon had never harmed anyone. He'd only ever been a loyal friend. The family head scoffed. Nobility's dignity mattered more than facts. He mocked Rian for enjoying noble privileges while defying their rules. But Rian stood firm. What good was status if it cost him a true friend? His father countered that commoners like Sharon only leached off nobles' wealth. Rian refused to believe Sharon would ever do that. The family head smirked cruelly. Prove it, he challenged. Reina and Rian froze. How could anyone prove intent? Yet Rian couldn't back down. If he failed, Sharon would die. The only thing he could prove was his own conviction. But reckless words wouldn't sway his father. Desperate, Rian locked eyes with Sharon. Sharon's expression was steady and focused, the same look he wore during their duels. Rian remembered Sharon's advice. Observe every move. Predict the enemy's true aim. He began analyzing his father like an opponent. This wasn't a family quarrel. As a grade 4 knight and the Ogent house leader, his father was a master of fencing art. This was a duel of blades. A memory flashed, his instructor sneering that Sharon was just a commoner. Rian had been horrified. Even his mentor saw the world through the lens of status. Rian grew furious, remembering how his instructor had claimed that only those who could communicate through swordplay were worthy of friendship, something Sharon had already proven. The instructor had once challenged Rian, demanding to know what he believed was most important for a noble. He'd even asked whether Rian had ever considered the immense burden Sharon carried simply by associating with a noble. The instructor had warned that mere arguments wouldn't solve anything, leaving Rian silent, torn between frustration and helplessness. But with his trademark stubbornness, Rian refused to surrender like a coward. His unyielding determination seemed to impress the instructor against all odds. Without a word, The man had offered Rian his own sword. He'd made it clear that Rian could only return if he carried that blade, and if he wasn't prepared, he shouldn't take a single step forward. Understanding the unspoken test, Rian had bowed deeply, silently vowing to honor the debt. The instructor's final lesson had lingered. Abandoning a friend meant abandoning part of oneself. Now, back in the present, Rian suddenly laughed, realizing the truth behind his father's actions. He turned to the room, declaring that his very presence proved his faith in Chiron. No other evidence was needed. His father's patience shattered, his voice icy as he reminded everyone this wasn't some petty family dispute. He coldly stated he'd execute Rian himself if it meant preserving the family's honor. The declaration sent a visible shock through Reina and the servants. Unshaken, Rian steadied his footing. With the poise of a noble, he vowed to renounce the Ojent name if necessary. His father sneered, demanding Rian draw his sword and stake his life on his so-called friendship. Without hesitation, Rian unsheathed his blade. The family head stiffened, unprepared for his supposedly spoiled son to stand against him. But Rian shook his head, clarifying that the sword wasn't raised against his father, only in defense of his faith. His father mocked him, accusing him of using Chiron to inflate his own pride. Rian immediately denied it. He admitted Chiron was stronger than him, and all he wanted was to help him rise where he belonged. Enraged, the family head shifted blame to Chiron, accusing him of deluding Rian into thinking nobles and commoners could ever be equals. Calmly, Chiron denied the accusation, while Rian stepped forward, swearing to protect him. Chiron insisted Rian bore no responsibility for any of this. He would face the consequences of his own choices. From the very beginning, when Rian had offered friendship, Chiron had known it might cost him his life. Even now, facing death, he refused to regret their bond. Voice breaking, Rian echoed Chiron's words to his father. He declared that exile or disownment wouldn't change their friendship, leaving his father stunned into silence. Reina wiped away tears, moved by their unshakable loyalty. Even the usually stoic Ojent servants were visibly emotional, all except head butler, whose face twisted in silent fury. The head butler, the architect of this entire ordeal, seemed on the verge of exploding. Suddenly, raucous laughter erupted from the mansion's upper floors. Reina immediately recognized her grandfather's voice, her spirits lifting. The old man sounded delighted, marveling at the spectacle unfolding in his final years. Reina felt a glimmer of hope for Chiron's safety because Clumph, her grandfather, was wise and didn't obsess over social status. Chiron had learned Clump's true identity. He was a general of the Thormia kingdom and a third-tier swordsman. Clumph was the former head of the Ojent family, a man of formidable legacy. Rian's father saw this as no simple matter to resolve, but Clumph found Chiron intriguing. He insisted on hearing first-hand testimonies. Reina, who'd been itching to speak up, stepped forward and praised Chiron's extraordinary talent for playing the piano. Besides, Chiron had planned to leave that very day. His task was complete. The idea that he'd befriended Rian for personal gain made no sense. Clumph weighed Reina's words, then turned to the next witness, Rai. Rai's face twisted in anger as he openly admitted his dislike for Chiron. Rian's father was pleased. He'd always relied on Rai's predictable stubbornness. But then Rai snapped that this issue had nothing to do with him, leaving Rian's father baffled. Rai clarified, yes, he despised Chiron, but he couldn't care less about Rian's friendships. He just wanted this over with so he could leave. Even Reina was stunned. Rai had indirectly defended Chiron. Clumph, however, grew more amused. Rai never subtly took sides like this. Next, Clumph called the third witness, Temeran, who'd observed Chiron closely. The head butler signaled Temeran to toe the family line. Servants like them existed to please their masters, nothing more. But Temeran ignored the hint. Coldly factual, he stated Chiron had not only done his job flawlessly, but finished 6 months ahead of schedule. The head butler fumed. Clumph pressed further, wondering Temeran know about Rian and Chiron's friendship. Temeran had often seen them together but hadn't realized they were friends. Still, he argued, no ordinary person could have cataloged 10,000 books alone. Chiron was moved. Despite Temeran's icy demeanor, he'd stood up for him in front of the entire family. Rian's father's expression darkened. Suddenly, Clump's face hardened. He wasn't accepting this situation. Reina gasped, but Rian's father smirked in relief. Clump acknowledged their friendship, but warned. Rumors would spark political backlash from rivals. With so many relying on the Ojent name, he had no choice. Their friendship had to end. He hoped Chiron understood the family's precarious position. Reina wanted to protest, but she couldn't deny the truth in his words. Even Rian stayed silent, defeated by logic. Clump turned to Rian, pleading for his compliance. Then he addressed Chiron directly, thanking him for teaching Rian about true friendship and begging him to let it end there. Chiron closed his eyes, deep in thought. But when he opened them, his resolve was steel. He refused to sever their bond. Reina and Clump stared, stunned. Rai and Rian's father were equally shocked. No commoner had ever dared to defy Clump Ojent like this before. Rian, who'd been speechless earlier, now watched Chiron's unwavering determination in awe. Chiron vowed he'd stay away if his presence harmed Rian, but no power could make him stop considering Rian a friend. If the family acknowledged that much, he'd obey their terms. Rian's hands began trembling uncontrollably, overwhelmed by a wave of self-disgust at his earlier hesitation. While he'd been relieved that Chiron's life would be spared, Chiron at first showed no such concern for his own survival at all. His entire being had been focused solely on preserving their fragile friendship. Chiron had truly realized discarding a friend meant discarding a part of himself. Suddenly, Rian drew his sword, shouting defiantly at everyone present. The act left the entire room in stunned silence. Reina had a terrible premonition and tried to stop him, but Rian ignored her, driving his sword into the ground. He knelt in the formal posture of a noble knight, then swore an oath to become Chiron's sword for life. Rian's father trembled with rage, never expecting his son to go this far. Just like that, the Ojent residence erupted into chaos. A knight's oath was a sacred vow, a noble's lifelong pledge to protect another. Unbreakable, irrevocable. Rian, grinning with satisfaction, challenged his family's objections. Now, they had no choice. The other family members gaped, shocked by his recklessness. Chiron marched over, scolding Rian for making such a rash vow. Clump fixed Rian with a stern gaze, demanding to know his true motives. Did he choose Chiron for his talent, or because Rian himself was useless? Rian answered with noble resolve. A sword doesn't judge, it protects. His words only deepened the room's confusion. Clump burst into laughter, thrilled by his grandson's growth. But he couldn't resist mocking Rian, pitying Chiron for getting stuck with such a dull blade. Rian scowled but had no rebuttal. Clump strode to Chiron, clapped his shoulder, and entrusted Rian to his care. Chiron thanked him for the genuine acknowledgement. Since Rian and Chiron were now bound for life, Clump ordered the head butler to fetch Chiron's parents in a noble's carriage. The head butler stood frozen, while two servants behind him exhaled in relief. Later, in Rian's room, he lounged smugly, replaying his family's shocked faces. Chiron kept grumbling about the recklessness of that night's oath. Rian sat up, clarifying he hadn't sworn it just because they were friends. Chiron had a magnetic strength. Rian had simply bet his life on someone worth following. The words flustered Chiron, the weight of them crushing. Chiron muttered that he'd have to work harder to deserve such protection, a statement that pierced Rian's heart. Reina barged in, demanding confirmation about the oath's seriousness, but she paused, baffled to find Rian collapsed from Chiron's earlier jab. Sitting on the bed, she reported that Rian's father and Clump were making plans. They wanted to enroll Chiron and Rian at Kaizen Swordsmanship Academy. Chiron's eyes widened in disbelief. Being enrolled in the academy was something he'd never anticipated, but Reina simply shrugged as if this were the most natural thing in the world. He was practically family now. Rian protested. This ruined his plans to slack off with Chiron. Reina stomped on his foot, reminding him this mess was his fault. Rian countered that Chiron was a mage in training. Swordsmanship school was pointless. Reina's jaw dropped. The boy her brother had sworn a sacred knight's oath to wasn't just some commoner. but a potential mage capable of entering the spirit zone. It hit her. Her brother had sworn a knight's oath to a future mage. Rian, unfazed, shoved her out. Reina kept praising Chiron over and over for his rare talent of applying spirit zone to swordplay. Chiron blushed hard at her genuine compliments, clearly not used to the attention. Reina mentioned she'd discuss Chiron's potential with her grandfather again, which made Rian suddenly think about his own instructor's fate if Chiron actually enrolled at the academy. Turns out, Rian's instructor had already terminated his contract and was leaving that very day, something Reina assumed Rian already knew. Rian's mind flashed through all the things his teacher had done for him over the years. A real man shouldn't say goodbye to someone like that. A butler then informed Chiron that his parents had arrived at the Ogent estate and were waiting in the guest room. Chiron lit up, immediately wanting to see them first. He practically flew down the stairs, alarming the butlers who worried he'd trip. Chiron told them to act normal. He wasn't some noble who needed special treatment, but the butlers refused. They'd lose their heads if they slacked off. When he finally reached the guest room, Chiron threw the door open, rushing in to meet his family. Vincent and Olina stared at him like they couldn't believe their eyes. The three of them hugged tightly. The reunion, so emotional it could have been ripped straight from a movie. Chiron frowned a little, noticing how much thinner his parents looked. They asked why he'd called them there. Chiron explained he'd been given an incredible opportunity by the Ogent family. He walked them through everything that had happened, start to finish. His dad just stood there, stunned, silent. Vincent wondered if Chiron was being mistreated and lying to make him feel better. He broke down sobbing, freaking out about Chiron's safety, while Olina tried to calm him. Suddenly, the door swung open again. The head of the household, Bischoff Ogent, introduced himself formally, followed by Rian and Reina, who bowed politely to Vincent and Olina. Chiron's parents were floored, nobles introducing themselves like equals to commoners. They scrambled to apologize and return the introductions, nerves cranked up to 10. Only then did Vincent and Olina finally believe everything Chiron had told them. The Ogents invited them to dinner, seating them at the same table as the family, with a spread fancier than anything they'd ever seen. Even the butlers treated them like nobility, which just made things weirder. When they were served aristocratic tea before discussions, the awkwardness hit a new high. Vincent had no clue about the knight's oath, but he never expected this level of respect. Finally, he worked up the nerve to ask what exactly had happened with Rian's oath. Even with lingering annoyance, Bischoff admitted that the situation was true, though it left a bitter taste in his mouth. But Bischoff went on to explain that he wouldn't break his knight's oath and treat them unfairly either. Because of that, Bischoff told them not to hold back and to treat each other as equals, even promising his full support for Chiron. Chiron was genuinely impressed by Bischoff's honorable demeanor and professionalism. Clump joked around casually with Bischoff, while Reina seemed satisfied with how positively things were unfolding. Bischoff pointed out that Chiron had a rare genius-level talent for using the Spirit Zone, so he planned to enroll Chiron in the prestigious Alpheus Magic Academy. Bischoff casually considered only what was best for Chiron, completely overlooking Vincent's commoner status. Only after Clump reminded him did Bischoff realize his oversight, mentioning that Chiron would officially become a mage upon graduation, something that shocked Vincent. Finally, his son's dream of becoming a mage was within reach, but there was a problem. Alpheus Magic Academy only accepted nobles. Clump, however, had a solution. They could adopt Chiron as their own. Clump handed them the adoption papers, clarifying that they weren't actually taking Chiron away. It was just a formality to grant him noble status. Vincent looked lost, unsure what to do, his eyes darting to Chiron for guidance. Suddenly, Chiron grabbed his father's hand. He immediately refused the Ogent family's adoption offer, declaring he already had real parents. Reina tried to explain it was just paperwork, nothing more. Clump backed her up, emphasizing this was a rare opportunity for Chiron to rise in status. But Chiron stood firm. He'd rather stay a commoner than deny his parents. Clump warned him commoners couldn't enroll in magic school, but Chiron dug his heels in, saying he'd give up magic entirely if that's what it took. Clump fired back that he'd never become a mage then. Chiron just shrugged and said, "Then I won't," stunning everyone with his unwavering resolve. Old man Clump started losing patience, irritated by Chiron's stubbornness. He challenged Chiron, saying dreams required sacrifice and questioning if his determination was even real. But Chiron countered, no dream, no matter how noble, was worth uprooting the very people who gave him life. His dreams were the fruit, but his parents were the roots. From learning to read to understanding life itself, every opportunity, even meeting the Ogent family, was only possible because of his parents' sacrifices. Denying his origins would leave him hollow, like a tree stripped of its roots. The room fell silent. No one could argue with that. Clump felt a strange familiarity, as if he'd seen this kind of resolve before. Then, out of nowhere, Vincent bowed and asked them to accept Chiron's adoption. Chiron was completely thrown by his father's sudden shift, and Clump reminded Vincent to consider Chiron's feelings too. That's when Vincent finally confessed. Chiron wasn't their biological son after all. 1. Chiron and his mom were totally caught off guard by Vincent's sudden statement. Vincent doubled down, insisting they should have guessed the truth sooner, given how little Chiron resembled them physically. He even dropped the bombshell that Chiron might actually be noble-born, so if the Ogent family had adopted him, he'd technically be where he belonged. Bischoff backed Vincent up, confirming the whole thing was legit. Olena couldn't hold back her tears, completely wrecked by the revelation. Chiron snapped at his dad for making such a huge decision without even talking to him first. Vincent apologized but insisted Chiron had to know the truth eventually. But the real shocker, Chiron had actually known about this for years. The reason he never brought it up, he just wanted Vincent and Olena to be his only parents, no substitutes. And now here was Vincent, trying to hand him 6 new ones like it was no big deal. Vincent admitted he couldn't stand watching Chiron give up his dreams just for their sake. Chiron shot back that as long as he worked hard, he'd make opportunities happen without abandoning his family. No way was he ditching the people who raised him, no matter what. That finally got through to Vincent, who broke down and hugged Chiron, tears flooding the Ogent household. Clump just nodded like he got it. Parenting was never easy. Bischoff sighed, remembering his own struggles raising his kids solo. Even Rianne got misty-eyed, realizing for the first time what real family bonds looked like. Bischoff then nudged Clump to negotiate with Headmaster Alpheus. After all, the guy owed Clump a favor from way back. Clump's eyes gleamed with mischief. The second Bischoff mentioned the debt. The old man was already plotting how to strong-arm the headmaster into cooperating. Bischoff just sighed again, remembering how Clump had forced him into becoming family head too. 3 days later, thanks to Bischoff's help, Chiron's parents were crashing at the Ogent estate. Vincent still looked guilty sometimes, over-worrying about Chiron's future. That night, Rianne and Chiron finally had time for a heart-to-heart before heading off to their separate academies. Fast forward 3 more days, and Rianne was bawling his eyes out at the thought of leaving for swordsmanship school. Chiron cheered him up, promising to spam him with letters. Rianne vowed to become the strongest swordsman to protect Chiron, but before he could finish his cool speech, Reyna smacked him upside the head. She told Chiron not to stress. She and Clump would make sure he got into Alpheus Academy. Chiron bowed so deep it was almost comical, gratitude pouring off him. Reyna couldn't help but smile. She'd started off seeing him as a little brother, but his grit and maturity totally flipped that script. Dude was legit impressive. She hyped him up, saying he'd be an insane mage one day. With that, they all went their separate ways. Chiron waved them off, wishing them safe travels. Rianne jokingly told Chiron to crush the other students once he got to the academy. Chiron just grinned, promising to do his best, and praying for Rianne too. Moved to Alpheus Magic Academy, where Clump was negotiating with the headmaster. The old man laid out his special request, but the headmaster wasn't budging. Rules were rules. Clump started ranting about how much he'd bailed the guy out in the past. Was this how he repaid favors? Still no dice. The headmaster had a pile of requests. He couldn't just make exceptions. Clump was this close to losing it with the stubborn geezer. Clump made a bold promise to the headmaster, insisting that Chiron was nothing like other kids. And the intensity in his expression actually made the headmaster a little curious. Clump went full hype man, spilling every insane detail about Chiron and Rianne's bond. For a second, Clump looked nostalgic, like he saw the headmaster's younger self in the story. The headmaster still wasn't convinced, questioning why such a supposedly talented kid wouldn't just take the normal entrance exam like everyone else. Finally, Clump dropped the real kicker. He admitted Chiron wasn't actually from a noble family at all. The headmaster froze. Suddenly, he was wondering if this was that kid, the one with blonde hair and blue eyes. Clump couldn't shake Chiron's words from his mind, how the kid claimed he'd never regret dying if it meant being Rian's friend. At first, Clump had just thought the boy was sly and smooth-talking, but when they offered to adopt Chiron and give him noble status, he'd refused without hesitation, saying he'd never forget his roots. Clump burst out laughing again. The whole thing seemed ridiculous to him. The headmaster hadn't expected Chiron to understand the law of cause and effect so deeply. Clump agreed. Nothing happened without a reason, yet so many people still missed that logic. Opportunities could come from anywhere, anytime. But if someone didn't know their own roots, they'd lose everything. And they should never compromise on what they believed was true. Didn't that mindset sound just like the headmaster in his younger days? But the headmaster felt that refusing to compromise made it too easy to judge others. And that was dangerous. Clump figured the headmaster still hadn't forgiven himself. Whatever mistake he'd made, it clearly haunted him. Clump reassured him he should let it go. After all, he'd guided so many talented young mages. The headmaster disagreed. He trained those kids precisely so they wouldn't follow his path and repeat his past horrors. Clump kept insisting the headmaster was a genius who'd found his way back to the right path. The headmaster walked to the window, staring at the vast world outside while thinking about Chiron. Clump told him to just accept Chiron already. This was fate. Who'd have thought the kid they met 4 years ago would return like this? The headmaster laughed. He didn't believe in fate, but in his heart, he couldn't deny it felt like destiny had brought Chiron back to them. Turning to Clump with a serious look, the headmaster firmly decided to enroll Chiron into the academy. 3 months later, on a beautiful spring day, a noble's carriage arrived at Chiron's home. Now 17, Chiron said his goodbyes, ready to leave for the academy. He hugged his mom, Olena, promising to write often. When his dad, Vincent, tried to kiss him, Chiron dodged it. Vincent hugged him instead, wishing him success. Outside, Vincent mentioned how the Ogen family kept sending money despite their refusals. Temeron was there, waiting to escort Chiron to the academy. After boarding the carriage, Chiron waved one last time, and they set off. Hours later, they arrived. Chiron stared at his dream academy in awe. He couldn't look away. He'd never imagined actually attending as a mage. Temeron told him not to worry about costs. All he had to do was study hard. Chiron genuinely thanked Temeron for everything. He'd never forget his kindness. Temeron warned that no matter how high a commoner soared, they'd never match nobles. At the academy, many nobles would look down on him. With fatherly concern, Temeron advised him to endure. It'd all work out in the end. Chiron expected mockery, but Temeron surprised him with warmth. Inside the academy, Temeron excused himself. Chiron thanked him again before he left. Scanning the halls, Chiron searched for his guide. A class board caught his eye. Alpheus Academy split studies into 10 tiers, each with its own difficulty. His jaw dropped when he saw only 10 students graduated yearly. Suddenly, someone called his name from behind. Turning, he recognized the headmaster from years ago. Respectfully, Chiron greeted him, saying he remembered. As they walked, the headmaster explained he'd take an entrance exam to determine his class. The headmaster asked if Chiron had unlocked the spirit zone yet. He quietly regretted not teaching him sooner. Before the exam, the headmaster gave him a campus tour. Chiron gaped at a student flipping book pages with magic. He was mesmerized by others practicing spells everywhere. Some floated mid-air. Others debated theories he couldn't follow. The sheer difference between this world and his old life stunned him. Before he could process it all, boom! An explosion rocked the hallway. A girl had botched a spell chant. Chiron blinked as students ignored it like it was normal. As they moved on, a red-haired girl passed by. Every guy nearby swooned over her beauty appearance. The principal led him toward the academy's student ranking board, where names of top performers were displayed. His eyes landed on the first-place spot for the middle class, taken by a girl named Amy Carmus. Sharon felt like he'd heard that name before, but he brushed the thought aside. Right then, he made up his mind to try cracking the academy's top ranks himself. One of Amy's friends suddenly called out to her, and Sharon glanced toward the girl being addressed. He froze. Amy was the same person he'd met years ago. It blew his mind that the top-ranked student had such a terrible personality. Memories of being bullied by her gang 4 years ago came rushing back. And now, here she was, the star of Alpheus Magic Academy's middle class. Amy's gaze flickered toward Chiron for a split second. Her friend hurried after her, not wanting to fall behind. Chiron quickly looked away, hoping Amy wouldn't recognize him. In the end, they just passed each other without a word. Though, unbeknownst to him, Amy's friend had noticed Chiron and was instantly smitten. Amy agreed with her friend's comment, but couldn't shake the feeling she'd seen Chiron somewhere before. Her friend found it weird. Amy had never shown interest in any guy until now. Amy denied it, insisting she just recognized his face. Meanwhile, the other boys could only stare in awe at Amy's stunning figure as she walked away. Little did they know, Chiron was the only one who knew about her dark past. After a short walk, they finally reached the testing hall. A group of younger students was already there, waiting for their turn. The principal told Chiron to observe how the kids handled their exams. 5 instructors stood ready to guide and evaluate the test takers, who'd step into a prepared circle to measure their spirit zone. Inside the spirit zone, floating letters would appear on the ground, helping gauge their strength, flexibility, and type. All Chiron had to do was answer the instructor's questions honestly. Simple enough, he thought. One examiner started the kid's test with a series of questions. Then, the kid closed his eyes and successfully entered his spirit zone. The instructor asked him to call out the farthest letter he could see. The kid answered 6, and the examiners quickly jotted it down. The principal explained that 6 meant the kid's spirit zone had a 6-meter diameter. The kid added that everything looked red, confirming his spirit zone's color. The instructor nodded. Red meant a divergent type, suited for high-volume energy output. Next came tests for visual clarity and temperature sensitivity. Once done, the examiners dismissed the kid with some praise. One female teacher remarked how talented this year's batch was, and the male instructor beside her agreed. Then, they called Chiron's name. The principal gave him a firm nod, urging him to go all out. The examiners had written Chiron off before he even started. Some kid who got in through the principal's connections using the Ogent family name. The female instructor figured if he had no talent, he'd just become another dropout. The male tester started with the most basic question: could Chiron even use magic? Chiron's answer didn't help his case. He admitted he'd never formally studied magic. The principal felt that familiar pang of regret. 4 years ago, he could have changed everything for this kid. The instructor's voice dripped with skepticism as he questioned whether Chiron stood any chance of entering a spirit zone at all. Without any grand claims, Chiron simply stated he would attempt it. The instructors exchanged relieved glances. At least this wasn't some blatant case of favoritism. Then Chiron closed his eyes, and something incredible happened. His spirit zone activated. A brilliant blue light exploded from his body, radiating magical energy so intense it made the air hum. Inside the zone, Chiron saw more symbols and letters than should have been possible. The instructor told him to call out the furthest number he could see. Silence. The examiner had to call Chiron's name twice before getting any response. Some teachers assumed embarrassment. The female instructor just raised an eyebrow. The principal stepped in, assuring Chiron this wasn't about grades, just honesty. Finally, Chiron spoke. He saw numbers all right, but too many to possibly count. The frustrated instructor told him to stop looking and start feeling the magic instead. Chiron tried to explain he was feeling it, but the numbers kept growing endlessly. Now annoyed, the tester snapped that Chiron should just read the first damn number he saw. Inside that impossible spirit zone, the numbers stretched to infinity, except for one. 3.14, Chiron said, and the room went dead silent. The female instructor blinked. They hadn't programmed pi into the test parameters. Chiron checked again, but there it was, clear as day in glowing blue. Only one explanation fit. Chiron's spirit zone exceeded their maximum measurable range, probably over 30 meters. The next question is, what color dominated his zone? He described seeing nothing but blue, a single, all-encompassing blue that filled his entire awareness. Now the instructors were completely lost. Blue meant convergent type, which should have been small and focused, not this monstrosity. Now the principal understood Clump's desperation to enroll this kid. This wasn't just talent, this was something other. Another instructor asked about the floating orbs in his zone. Chiron didn't need to count. He could feel every single one of those glowing spheres. 867, he said, and the examiner's hands started shaking. That number broke every record, defying all their understanding of magic physics. 867 orbs meant 86.7% density, a concentration of power that should have been impossible. A chill ran down the principal's spine. This wasn't promising. This was downright terrifying. The female teacher suddenly broke into a cold sweat, realizing something unsettling. She couldn't help but wonder just how cold Chiron was feeling right then. Chiron replied that it was freezing, enough to almost numb him, which lined up exactly with what the teacher had suspected. Without wasting time, she jotted down the test results on the evaluation sheet. The instructor then politely told Chiron to wait outside while they finalized his class placement. Once Chiron and the other students had left, the room grew quiet. The instructors immediately started discussing the weirdness surrounding Chiron. Nothing like this had ever happened with a student before. The fact that Chiron hadn't used any reinforcement magic at all was downright unbelievable. The kinda clueless male instructor even suspected Chiron was lying. A 17-year-old who couldn't cast spells but had a 90% density and a 30-meter spirit zone? That made zero sense. The smarter female teacher shut that down fast. Why would a kid lie on an entrance exam? Plus, he'd just fail later if he didn't actually know anything. Outside, the younger students stared at Chiron, making him feel awkward under their gaze. The teacher added that pi was classified as an error code. No student would fake that just for attention. The headmaster asked where they should place him. The female teacher pushed for class 5 so Chiron could start learning magic as soon as possible, but the dense male instructor objected. That guy insisted on putting him in the beginner class since he couldn't even use magic yet. Annoyed, the female teacher snarked that not all students were as slow as him, which ticked the guy off. Soon, they were in a full-blown argument, with the man accusing her of just wanting to teach Chiron herself. But the other instructors sided with Thad, the stubborn guy, suggesting a step-by-step approach in Class 10. The wiser instructor worried Chiron would lose motivation stuck in boring basics and proposed Class 7 instead. He told the headmaster they could monitor his progress and bump him up if he excelled. If Chiron surpassed expectations, he could even skip grades. The headmaster considered it. Finally, he agreed. Chiron would go to Class 7. It was explained that Alpheus Magic Academy had 10 tiers. Levels 10 to 8 were basics, focusing on spirit zone development. Levels 7 to 4 covered advanced magic theory and application. The final tier was for training professional mages through hands-on practice. The next morning at Alpheus, all eyes were on Chiron as he joined his new class. The students couldn't stop staring at the new kid who'd skipped straight to intermediate level. They whispered about how wild it was that he'd bypassed the lower ranks entirely. Chiron introduced himself, trying to play it cool. The mixed reactions threw him off, making the vibe a little awkward. Still, he was pumped. His journey as a mage was officially starting. The Alpheus Magic Academy sprawled across a 75 mountain with 33 buildings and 40 training rooms. Classes ended at 5 p.m., after which students could do whatever they wanted. Most hung out at the 24-hour library. Some even formed research clubs to geek out over magic. Right now, Chiron was grinding through material, struggling to catch up. But his hard work paid off. He was keeping pace so far. When class ended, he realized he had no idea where the next one, Spirit Zone practice, was held. He tapped the girl in front of him for directions. Maria, a shy type, jumped a little when Chiron spoke to her. She explained it was a combined class held twice a week. Once they reached the training building, the atmosphere shifted. Everyone was fawning over Amy. Some asked for autographs, others just stared. Chiron watched her from his seat, figuring she'd probably advance to the final tier soon. Suddenly, the teacher, a level 6 Spirit Zone specialist named Athela, greeted the class. After a quick intro, she acknowledged the new student joining today. All eyes snapped to Chiron, and he squirmed a little. Athela gestured for him to introduce himself, which made it even more awkward. He stood up and mumbled his name to the room. Amy and her friend watched him from the back. Her friend gushed about recognizing Chiron earlier, thrilled to finally know his name. Amy, though, stayed quiet. The name didn't ring a bell, but his face, it bugged her. Then, it hit her. He was the kid she'd seen getting jumped in that alley. That signature blonde hair was a dead giveaway. Amy's hands shook, like fate was playing some messed up joke on her. The Karmas family had a reputation for being geniuses, all thanks to their signature red-eyed trait. That ability let them see things crystal clear, like a mirror, and grasp the deepest essence of stuff, basically making studying pointless. The youngest Karmas daughter, Amy Karmas, was the biggest prodigy of them all. She could pick up anything crazy fast and nail it perfectly. Sounds awesome, but the downside, everything being so easy just bored her to death, and she ended up hating pretty much everything. She'd sneak out all the time, doing her own thing without dropping the Karmas name, hanging with street thugs, watching them brawl. That was her idea of fun. At first, it was thrilling, but even that got old real quick. Then something finally sparked her excitement again. A street kid who could use magic. Yeah, that kid was Chiron. And now, that same kid was all grown up, standing in the same magic academy as her. Her two freaked-out friends snapped Amy out of it. She'd been staring at him like she wanted to swallow him whole. Amy was dead sure it was Chiron. Her eyes never lied. A wave of dread hit her as ugly memories rushed back. She'd spent years burying that past and praying Chiron wouldn't recognize her. The whole mess started with a dumb misunderstanding. Chiron thought she was trying to strip him. Now she pictured him blabbing to the whole school about her shady past, about how she hung out with street gangs and supposedly tried to undress him. Lost in her panic, Amy didn't even realize she was tearing her textbook apart. No way she'd let that happen. She had to shut this down before it got worse. Class finally started, with Professor Athela diving into a lesson on spirit zones. Spirit zones came in different types, with the first kind always forming a perfect circle, but sometimes that circular shape just didn't cut it. Athela decided to demonstrate by conjuring an image zone. Image zones were basically training wheels, a way to visualize spirit zones clearly. She explained that circular spirit zones were pretty useless in real fights. Like, if her zone was 10 meters wide, but the enemy was outside that range, total waste. To prove her point, Athela whipped up a fireball spell. She launched it straight at the dummy target. The fireball shot across the room, dead accurate. But the fireball instantly fizzled out the second it left the spirit zone. Magic only worked inside its range. Without missing a beat, Professor Athela reshaped her spirit zone into a straight line, nailing the target dead on. This time, the fireball shot straight through and hit its mark. Chiron's mind was blown. He had no idea mages could tweak their spirit zones like that. But Athela pointed out the catch. It took way too much focus to pull off. That's why mages relied on 4 preset patterns, each optimized for different situations. The most basic was the defensive type. More angles meant stronger protection. Next was the attack type, shooting straight lines in all directions, perfect for hitting many targets. Then came the cross-shaped pattern. Limited targeting, sure, but killer for moving targets since you could spin it like a turret. Last was the detached form, the toughest to master. Even level 5 mages struggled with it. The class buzzed with excitement as Athela prepped to demo the advanced technique. She summoned a normal spirit zone, then, slowly, it began peeling away from her body, until it fully detached, floating mid-air like a rogue bubble. Chiron's brain short-circuited. Spirit zones were supposed to be mental extensions of the mage. How could it just leave her? Athela nonchalantly maneuvered the orb around the room. Mastering this technique was crazy difficult, but the payoff made it all worth it. A mage could instantly cast any spell and chase down targets with no directional restrictions whatsoever. The students lost it, hyped by their teacher's flawless control. Suddenly, Professor Athela called on Amy Karmas to demonstrate magic for her juniors. The class erupted in cheers. Amy's friends fist-pumped, already proud before she'd even moved. Meanwhile, Amy looked like she'd seen a ghost, panic mode activated. Attention was the last thing she wanted, especially with Chiron right there, maybe seconds away from recognizing her. Even though cross-type spirit zones had the advantage of long-range coverage, they struggled against multiple fast-moving enemies. That wasn't the case for a mage with absolute focus, though someone who could accurately pivot the zone's direction. Right now, Amy Karmas was demonstrating exactly that under Instructor Athela's orders. No surprise, the students were impressed by Amy's skill. Chiron was no exception. It fueled his determination to catch up to his own lagging abilities. Amy kept spinning, firing off fireballs at every target around her like it was nothing. Her calm, confident demeanor only made her more mesmerizing to watch. One guy even daydreamed about dating her, only to get roasted by the girls nearby, which just made Chiron even more confused. Why would someone like Amy hang around with the thugs? After a while, Amy wrapped up her demonstration. Her gaze suddenly locked onto Chiron, sharp, intense, like she was staring right through him. The moment Chiron noticed, uneasy feelings settled in his gut. Other students caught Amy stealing glances at the new kid too, making the whole thing even more suspicious. But deep down, Amy was panicking. She hadn't meant to look his way at all. Now, whispers spread about what kind of history those two might have. Still, that one look was enough. Both of them knew. They remembered each other. Amy's mind spiraled with random, half-formed thoughts about Chiron. Next thing she knew, her face was burning red, and her friend totally noticed. Once Instructor Athela's lesson ended, the class split up for timed practice sessions. The 7th class started with defense forms, going through the basics first. Chiron planned to deploy his spirit zone like usual. Then he'd slowly shape it into a defense form step by step, so it wouldn't collapse. Out of nowhere, he felt this weird certainty, like he'd already succeeded. To test it, he asked Instructor Athela if he could use the image zone. She agreed, but warned him to stay calm, even if it was his first time. Meanwhile, students whispered about Chiron's guts to practice in front of everyone. Even Amy's friend nudged her to watch. Amy choked mid-sip and jerked her head toward him, her weird reaction making her friend side-eye her. Chiron stood in the center of the image zone, eyes shut, focusing to enter his spirit zone. When he opened them, boom! A circular spirit zone exploded outward around him, way faster than expected. Everyone gaped at the insane size of it. The zone's diameter kept climbing on the measurement indicator. Chiron vaguely remembered his entrance exam, but couldn't recall the instructor ever mentioning his zone's range. He forced it to stop, worried it'd cause problems if it grew any larger. Even then, it had already hit a 20-meter diameter. The 5th class were shook. Average zones maxed out at 13 meters. Chiron tried compressing it into a defense form, just like he'd planned, except it backfired. His zone destabilized, on the verge of collapsing. Amy and her 4th class friends doubted he'd pull it off in one try. Chiron analyzed his mistake, wondering if the visual feedback threw him off, but then it hit him. He'd weakened his focus by suppressing the zone's size. So this time, he went all out, letting his spirit zone expand naturally. It kept growing and growing until the other students started freaking out. Amy just let out this awkward laugh, because honestly, what even was that size? By the time it stopped expanding, Chiron's spirit zone had reached a staggering 41-meter diameter. Now all that was left was for Chiron to compressing it into a defense form. Slowly but surely, the zone shrank, condensing into the shape he wanted. This time, the other students were straight up impressed. Against all odds, Chiron had nailed a perfect defense form on his first real attempt. Instructor Athela looked thrilled, totally not expecting that kind of result. Amy's friend was now low-key crushing on Chiron and asked Amy what she thought, but Amy's expression had gone dark. her weird mood swings confusing her friend even more. After seeing Chiron's progress, Amy changed her plans. She'd confront him, quietly, without anyone noticing. Athila had always assumed Chiron spent his whole life training in the mountains. That's why he was so ridiculously talented when it came to omnipotence. Chiron could feel his spirit zone shrinking down to something tiny compared to its original size. Athila confirmed it, but pointed out that even though it was smaller, its density had skyrocketed. With that kind of density, his spirit zone could tank both physical attacks and mental magic. She gave him props for a job well done and told him to step back. The other students cheered, hyping up Chiron's genius like he was some kind of prodigy. The praise made him so embarrassed he practically bolted off the stage. Athila finally understood why the other teachers were so obsessed with him. From now on, she'd be keeping a close eye on his progress too. Of course, Chiron's little performance didn't just disappear. It sparked all kinds of reactions among the students. Some were genuinely impressed. Others straight up admired him. A few were just salty. And then there were those who stared at him with creepy, unreadable expressions. The next morning at Alpheus Magic Academy, someone else had Chiron in their crosshairs, the female examiner from before. She walked into class, only to get bombarded by students begging for gossip about her first love story. Turns out, the class she walked into was Chiron's. Her name was Sienna Oliver, a 6th-tier mage who specialized in ice magic. Chiron had no idea she was actually the homeroom teacher for Class 5. The only reason she was teaching Class 7 is that she wanted to personally mentor him. She was still fuming at Thad for blocking Chiron from joining Class 5. With sheer determination, she was going to fast-track him straight into her class. The intensity of her stare sent a chill down Chiron's spine. He doubted that look was meant for him. The students kept pushing, asking if the rumors about Sienna and Thad dating were true. The question made her visibly disgusted. In response, she summoned ice magic, forming a crystal right in her palm. She threw the question back at the class, waiting to see if anyone could explain the theory behind it. Dead silence. The air turned frigid, frost creeping over the windows. Students shivered, but Sienna just kept lecturing like nothing was wrong. There was no such thing as cold energy in this world, just temperature going up or down. Hit absolute zero, and that's when things got real. By pulling even a little energy from the room, ice magic could take form, but break it down into tiny particles and create convection currents. The temp would drop so fast it could kill, exactly what they'd just experienced. The class sat there, realizing how close they'd come to freezing to death. Then Professor Sienna dropped the real knowledge, how mages could absorb all that energy. Inside a spirit zone, a mage could control everything. Space, energy, even the rules. Limited range, but total dominance. They could sense everything inside it. Light, scent, physical feeling. But to activate magic, 2 conditions had to be met. It was omnipotence and omniscience. Omniscience was the knowledge needed to cast. Omnipotence was raw talent, the power to make it happen. Chiron froze. It was like she'd handed him the missing puzzle piece he'd been searching for. Sienna drove it home. A spirit zone was only part of the equation. The rest is endless study. Without hard work, there was no way to become a great mage. A piece of advice that felt like it was meant specifically for Chiron. He stayed quiet, emotions tangled, but one thing burned brighter than ever, his resolve to become a true mage. Sienna's lecture had just lit a new path. Now he knew exactly what to do. Later that afternoon, after classes ended, Chiron headed to the library alone, ready to hit the books. He was exhausted from pulling all-nighters to catch up, but he couldn't help it. Learning magic was addicting. Suddenly, his feet left the ground. He was floating. Someone had just snatched him up, yanking him away from campus. Next thing he knew, he was deep in the woods, far from the academy. They dumped him hard, sending him face first into the dirt, his books scattering everywhere. The kidnapper threw off their cloak, revealing Amy Carmus, the girl he'd met before. He'd expected to see her again, just not this soon. She summoned fire in her palm, clearly trying to scare him. Amy started sweating nervously, second-guessing whether she should go through with her attack. Chiron's expression threw her off. He wasn't glaring at her like she expected. It was nothing like the sharp look he had 5 years ago. Chiron calmly told her he remembered everything from that day 5 years ago. including the part where he tried to strip her. Amy immediately flushed with embarrassment and cut him off before he could say more. She stumbled over her words, trying to explain it was all a misunderstanding. She insisted she wasn't some perverted woman like he thought. Sharon just stared at her with a confused, almost silly expression, not getting what she meant. Amy clarified that it was the street thugs who wanted to undress. She never said anything like that herself. Her nerves spiked when Sharon pointed out how her own words back then had basically encouraged them. An awkward silence settled between them. Sharon finally caught on. Amy was just trying to keep rumors from spreading at the academy. He stood up and told her that if she was really sorry, she should just apologize. He knew how much influence he had as the top-ranked student, but that didn't change what had already happened. To him, it was simple. If you messed up, you owned up to it. But Amy took it the wrong way, thinking Sharon was trying to pressure her into submission. She snapped back, mocking his arrogance, as if she'd ever apologized to some commoner. Sharon was baffled by how full of herself she was acting. Amy coldly said apologizing to him was pointless. He'd probably just used the rumor against her anyway. Sharon, still naive, thought apologizing was just the decent thing to do. Amy laughed in his face, telling him the real world didn't work like that. She warned him about the academy's hierarchy. If she turned the seniors against him, even his classmates would ditch him. And as a commoner, he'd be lucky not to get expelled. Sharon hadn't expected her to be this desperate to silence him, but Amy just smirked, teasing him. She was only testing how far she could push him. She ordered him to bring her coffee every day from now on. Then, seeing his helpless look, she piled it on. For a commoner, getting into a noble academy was a big deal, and it'd be a shame if he lost that. Amy felt like she'd won, finally putting Sharon in his place. Sharon reluctantly agreed. If this was what it took to earn her trust, fine. Amy felt a smug satisfaction, praising what she saw as his smart choice to comply. With one last smug look, she reminded him not to snitch to the teachers. Amy walked off without giving Sharon another glance. He knew it wasn't fair, but still better than getting kicked out. The next day at Alpheus Magic Academy's courtyard, students watched as Sharon carried a cup of coffee toward Amy. He handed it over awkwardly, his face burning with embarrassment. Amy's friends couldn't believe this new kid was trying to get close to her, while she just gave him a cold stare. Amy was pleased he kept his word. She took the coffee but made a show of pointing out how much had spilled on the floor. Then she turned and left, deliberately humiliating him. And it worked. Sharon's face turned red with shame. Soon, whispers spread about how Amy had rejected him. Her friends actually felt bad for Sharon, thinking he had a crush, but Amy shut that down fast. Secretly, she was thrilled. Watching him squirm was way more fun than she expected. Meanwhile, her friends misunderstood, assuming she was flattered by his attention. Sharon wasn't having it. This was straight-up bullying, and he needed a plan. He clenched his fists, refusing to let anger take over. If he was stuck playing this game, he'd play it flawlessly. 10 days later, students were still buzzing about the romance between Sharon and Amy. But unlike day one, Sharon now walked up to her with confidence, coffee in hand. Some girls even envied Amy, impressed by his persistence. Amy loved the growing audience, more witnesses to his humiliation. Then her friend Sherelle suddenly asked when she'd finally accept Sharon as her boyfriend. Amy was baffled. Why would she ever date him? Sherelle explained the rumors. Amy, who never glanced at guys, was now happily accepting coffee from Sharon daily. The whole school was waiting for her to quote, confess her feelings. Amy was stunned. Sharon handed her the coffee with a look so sincere it could melt ice. The crowd cheered, egging Amy on to accept his love. Sharon even joked that this time, not a single drop had spilled. Amy's emotions exploded. Embarrassment, frustration, and fury all tangled together. Amy was seriously annoyed this time, so much that she deliberately knocked the coffee Sharon had brought for her right out of his hand. The whole class was stunned by Amy's harsh behavior, including Sherelle. Amy lashed out at Sharon, scolding him for slacking off instead of studying and wasting his time chasing girls. She stormed off, telling him not to bother bringing her coffee ever again. Sherelle awkwardly apologized for her friend's attitude. while Sharon just stood there, head down. Sharon quietly picked up the fallen coffee cup, and the other students felt bad for him, starting to blame Amy for being so cruel. He walked away, still looking down, and everyone assumed he was heartbroken. But secretly, he was actually relieved, finally free from Amy's bullying. That night in the Alpheus Magic Academy library, Amy was a mess, her thoughts all over the place, and her focus gone. She had meant to humiliate Sharon, but now the rumors were turning against her instead, which just ticked her off. She activated the red eye ability of the Karmas family. It let her replay past events in her memory with crystal clear detail. Sharon's reaction on the first day had been exactly what she wanted, satisfying even. But after that, his expression had changed completely, like he was genuinely sincere and determined. In her memory, she analyzed everything: his posture, movements, facial expressions, emotions, even the look in his eyes. Nothing was off. It was terrifying. Either Sharon could control his emotions like a robot, or he was actually being sincere the whole time. Amy slammed her book shut and headed for the dorm. Sherelle offered to walk with her, but Amy brushed her off. She just wanted to rest, exhausted from everything that had happened. As she pushed open the library door, a male student was waiting for her. His name was Jake Artius, and he greeted her smoothly. Amy sneered and asked what he wanted. Jake took the chance to badmouth Chiron, calling him shameless for chasing after her. Amy figured Jake was just there to laugh at her, but then he offered her a cup of high-quality, ridiculously expensive coffee. Amy was confused. Jake admitted he wanted to get closer to her, claiming he was way more worthy than some poor guy like Sharon. Amy was instantly disgusted, thinking he had to be joking. She knew Jake's crew had been watching her, waiting for a chance to take her down. Jake tried to explain the misunderstanding, annoyed at how rude Amy was being. But Amy didn't care. She mocked him, saying his only power came from his rich family name. That set Jake off. He decided it was time to teach her a lesson. He threatened to make the Karmas family suffer using his family's connections. Amy just laughed, saying his eyes looked like rotten fish, nothing like Sharon's. Hearing that he wasn't even on Sharon's level, Jake switched targets. He'd destroy Sharon instead, making sure he'd never be able to use magic again. Amy's expression changed instantly, her anger flaring. She dumped Jake's coffee on the floor. Her arrogance pushed Jake over the edge. But Amy wasn't backing down either. Her spirit zone crossform was already locked onto Jake. With killer intent radiating off her, she demanded to know who he planned to hurt. Jake trembled, reminding her about the Academy's no magic rule. Amy mocked him again, saying his answer was exactly what a coward would say. Not like Sharon, who never relied on anyone else. Without realizing it, she defended Sharon, saying he owned up to his actions and would surpass Jake in no time. Amy used her magic to flood the oxygen around Jake. If he tried casting now, it'd blow up in his face instantly. Knowing he was outmatched, Jake ran off, throwing out the classic loser's threat on his way. Amy slumped against the wall, drained. It had been a while since she'd felt this fired up. She didn't even know why she'd defended Sharon. She doubted he'd even show up tomorrow. But still, she was weirdly grateful to him. Thanks to him, her mind felt clear again. The next day at Alpheus Magic Academy, things felt oddly tense. As classes wrapped up, Sharon walked out, his mind still chewing over the lessons he'd just learned. He could only sigh in resignation as whispers about Amy rejecting him still floated among the students. Out of nowhere, he spotted Sherelle walking alone. No Amy in sight, which was weird. Sharon called out to her from behind, trying to be casual. But Sherelle's reaction was anything but normal. She screamed like she'd just seen a ghost. Panicked, she immediately asked where Amy was, leaving Sharon totally confused. Then Sherelle shoved a threatening letter in his face, one meant for Amy. The note demanded Amy go to Training Area 14 if she wanted Chiron to stay unharmed, claiming he'd been kidnapped. The culprits was a group called the Black Magicians, formed by Jake's gang. Sharon pressed Sherelle for details about them. Rewinding to 30 minutes earlier, some random student had handed Amy a letter, warning her to drop her arrogant attitude. Amy and Sherelle ignored it at first, brushing past the guy like he was nothing. But when he mentioned Sharon, Amy spun around and snatched the letter from his hands. After reading it, she realized it was a ransom note. Sharon had supposedly been taken. Amy already knew who was behind it. Jake had threatened to go after Sharon before. Still, she crumpled the letter and tossed it aside, acting like Sharon meant nothing to her. The messenger didn't care about her reaction. He just delivered the message and bounced. Sherelle freaked out over Sharon's kidnapping, but couldn't figure out why Amy was involved. She begged Amy to report this to the professors. Amy admitted that was the smart move, but getting the faculty involved would just expose their secrets. They'd be interrogated, and everything, including Sharon's commoner status, would come out. Plus, they'd find out Sharon wasn't even supposed to be here. Memories of Sharon being bullied flashed through Amy's mind. She remembered the sheer determination he'd shown, even humiliating himself just to earn her trust. She could practically feel how hard he'd fought for his spot at the academy. Amy made up her mind. She was going after Sharon. She shoved her bag at Sherelle. Then she ordered Sherelle to alert the professors if she wasn't back by 7 p.m. Back in the present, Sharon couldn't believe cold-hearted Amy was actually trying to save him. Shaking off his shock, he demanded the location from Sherelle. He had to catch up to Amy. He figured Amy hadn't reported this to protect their secrets. But if she was going alone, there was only one reason: to keep his secret safe. Without wasting another second, Sharon took off running. Then that weird floating sensation hit him again. Turns out Sherelle had grabbed him. No way he'd make it in time on foot. She told him to hold on tight, which was awkward since there was nothing to hold on to except her. Sherelle summoned a bright teleportation spell. Sharon's body lit up as the photonization process kicked in. Next thing he knew, they were blasting through the air at light speed, Sharon screaming the whole way. In minutes, they were closing in on the destination. Unfortunately, Sherelle had to stop short. Too many tall trees meant a crash risk. When they arrived, Amy was nowhere in sight. Sharon realized they'd moved her somewhere else. Knowing how bad this was, he told Sherelle to go get the professors now. They were out of options, and Sherelle could make it back fast. Besides, Amy got captured because of him. That bombshell left Sherelle stunned. She demanded answers, shocked she'd missed something this big. Sharon shut her down. No time for explanations. Sherelle got it and bolted for help. Once she was gone, Sharon activated the spirit zone to track Amy's trail. A set of footprints led into the woods behind the training area. He followed them, but they just stopped mid-path. Realization hit. They'd used flight magic. This was a trap. Then, in the distance, a plume of smoke rose. Whatever was happening over there, it wasn't good. Turns out, the explosion Sharon had just seen came from one of the students attacking Amy. The attack had missed on purpose, just a warning shot aimed at Amy. Then, 4 more students flew toward Amy's location. They surrounded her from all sides, cutting off any escape. Jake stepped forward, greeting Amy with his usual fake cool attitude. But Amy stayed calm, sarcastically pointing out how they were wasting their time with useless actions. As always, her arrogance pissed Jake off instantly. Amy asked Jake where Sharon was, her tone sharp. They just laughed at her, mocking how she'd fallen for the fake letter, teasing that Sharon probably didn't even care about her. Their real target wasn't Sharon at all. They just wanted payback for yesterday's humiliation. But Amy's reaction caught them off guard. She smiled, and it was downright terrifying. With Sharon not around, she could slaughter them without holding back. That creepy look made Jake break out in a cold sweat. He knew she meant every word. Without hesitation, Amy blasted the blonde-haired student who'd attacked her earlier with a fire spell. The guy panicked, desperately trying to put out the flames eating at his clothes. The others thought Amy had lost it, scrambling away in fear. They cast fly spells, trying to put distance between themselves and her. But it was pointless. Amy was a genius who could track and hit them with scary precision. Another fire spell slammed straight into Jake, the explosion sending him flying backward. Amy kept bombarding them, not letting up for a second. She adjusted her aim effortlessly, matching every move they made. They tried splitting up to throw her off, but that didn't work either. Amy could target them all at once. Without hesitation, she rained fireball spells down on them. The students dodged frantically, cursing Jake for underestimating Amy's strength. Jake wasn't done yet. He circled behind Amy and unleashed a wind cutter spell. The attack shot toward her from her blind spot, fast and deadly. Jake was sure this time he'd finish her off, but Amy sensed it coming and dodged easily using schema, smirking the whole time. She mocked him for relying on the same stupid tactics over and over. Then, she shifted into the spirit zone, locking onto Jake. A fireball spell hit him square in the face, exploding mid-air. Jake seethed. He barely survived by activating defense form. Amy kept taunting him, saying his trash skills couldn't even kill an ant. Cornered, Jake finally resorted to forbidden magic. Amy, still oblivious, kept laughing at his pathetic efforts. Then, out of nowhere, a strange wave of energy disrupted her senses. It felt like her brain was being shredded from the inside, pain shooting through her skull. Jake's friends joined in, hitting her with the same cursed spell. That's when she realized they were using anti-magic, a forbidden technique. Suddenly, her arms got bound by wind magic, paralyzing her. The spell left her helpless, unable to fight back. Jake finally felt satisfied, thinking he'd won. He pulled out a small knife, planning to ruin her pretty face so no guy would chase after her again. Amy panicked, struggling uselessly against the magic holding her down. As the blade inched closer to her face, she shut her eyes, resigned to her fate, finally understanding how little Sharon must have felt when she bullied him. Just then, a voice shouted at them to stop. It was Sharon, arriving right on time, gripping an ordinary wooden stick. Jake couldn't help but laugh at Sharon's reckless decision to show up alone. Amy, who'd been worried sick about him, also chewed him out for charging in to help like that. Sharon was totally confused seeing Amy, someone he thought was strong, getting overpowered by those bully students. But he was determined to buy time until the professors arrived, no matter what. Sharon stepped forward, gripping his wooden staff, ready to face them. Jake, though, just smirked and told his buddies to hit Sharon with that forbidden anti-magic spell. Just like Amy, Sharon started feeling the effects. His head throbbed like it was about to split open. The pain was too much, and he crumpled to the ground, barely holding on. Amy's heart raced seeing Sharon helpless like that. She yelled at him to get out of the spirit zone, quickly explaining how the anti-magic worked. Sharon's consciousness was fading fast. If he didn't act now, he'd black out. Then, suddenly, he remembered Athela's lessons about defense form, a technique that is able to block mental attacks. Anti-magic was basically a mental assault, messing with focus and disrupting the spirit zone. So Sharon figured if he could compress his spirit zone enough, the anti-magic wouldn't penetrate it. A blue glow pulsed around him as he fought through the agony. Amy begged him to stop, terrified he'd die if he pushed himself too hard. But against all odds, Sharon actually pulled it off. His spirit zone became so dense, the anti-magic bounced right off. He didn't stop there, though. He kept pushing, compressing his spirit zone way beyond normal limits. The anti-magic backlash hit Jake's crew instead, sending their own spell ricocheting back at them. Jake's gang freaked out, scrambling in total confusion. Sharon kept walking toward them, calm but relentless, and they panicked, screaming at him to stay back. But it was too late. The reflected anti-magic hit them point blank, knocking them out cold and leaving their minds wrecked. With the spell broken, the magic binding Amy's hands dissolved too. She was stunned, staring at Sharon in disbelief. His spirit zone control was insane. She couldn't wrap her head around what she'd just witnessed. It was unreal. Jake, now injured, was straight up terrified, convinced Sharon was some kind of monster for taking on 6 guys at once. All his buddies were already down, unconscious on the ground. Jake, still thinking Sharon was only good at defense, tried to challenge him with an attack spell instead. He activated his spirit zone, aiming straight for Sharon's body. His signature move, Wind Cutter, was about to slash through the air, except before he could even cast it, a fist smashed into his face. Hard. Turned out, that punch came from Amy, who'd had enough of Jake's cowardly crap. The force, boosted by her schema, sent him flying, but she wasn't done. She stormed over and kept wailing on him, all her pent-up rage over how he'd treated her, and Sharon just exploded. Jake's face was a mess, swollen, bloody, barely recognizable. Sharon tried to stop her, but Amy wasn't listening. Worried things would go too far, Sharon grabbed Amy and yanked her away from Jake. They both tumbled to the ground, and Sharon checked on Amy, but she wasn't responding. Thinking she'd passed out, he shook her gently, trying to wake her up. It turned out Sharon realized Amy wasn't actually unconscious. She was just exhausted. Sharon sincerely thanked Amy for trying to save him, his gratitude genuine. Suddenly, Amy stood up, claiming she felt completely refreshed. Blushing a little, Amy suggested they head back before the professors found out about the whole mess. But Sharon admitted they'd already reported the incident earlier. That made Amy groan. Mages only believed logical explanations, and the professors would definitely grill them for every detail. From their conversation, Jake picked up that Amy and Sharon were hiding something. Just as expected, a streak of purple light shot toward them from a distance. Before they could react, the light was right in front of them, leaving no chance to escape. Amy hoped it'd be some wise old professors who'd let a little scuffle slide. But her hopes crashed when she saw the two strictest professors approaching. Sherelle immediately checked on Amy, while Professor Thad scanned the area. Thad cast a spell called Fire Sun to light up the surroundings. His eyes widened when he saw so many students knocked out cold. He demanded an explanation from Amy, his star student, on how she got tangled in this chaos. Meanwhile, Professor Sienna looked annoyed that Thad only cared about Amy. Sienna marched up to Sharon and ordered him to explain the situation, but Jake stepped in, volunteering to tell the whole story himself. Jake admitted he held a grudge against Amy, acting like it was just normal teenage drama. Sienna wasn't fooled. She had proof of the threatening letters sent to Amy. Plus, she'd seen Jake using forbidden anti-magic spells. Jake argued that Amy's power was too strong anyway, and that he was the real victim here. Then he shifted blame, making Sharon and Amy look suspicious for not reporting things right away. He even accused them of hiding some shady secret. Amy was furious at Jake's underhanded tactics. Jake told Amy and Sharon to spill the truth right then and there. In his head, Jake plotted to expose their secret no matter the cost. Money wasn't an issue. But Sienna cut off his scheming thoughts, walking toward him with a glare. The fact that Jake and his crew used forbidden magic to attack other students was enough to expel him. Arrogant as ever, Jake doubted Sienna even had the authority to kick him out. Thad nervously reminded Sienna about Jake's family being the Academy's biggest donors. Sienna snapped back, telling Thad to quit teaching if he couldn't stand by his students. Thad just covered his face in shame. Jake kept threatening to get Sienna fired, but she just summoned her ice magic. Still smug, Jake acted like money could fix anything. As she prepared her spells, Sienna taught Jake a lesson about things money can't buy. Then she unleashed her ice magic straight at him. The freezing, unbreakable ice encased Jake's entire body. He couldn't move an inch, pure terror gripping him beyond words. Sienna finally released the spell, letting him go. The Academy knew all about Jake's crimes but hadn't punished him. Sienna asked if he knew why. Jake scoffed, saying it was obviously because of his family's money. But Sienna shut that down. The Academy didn't teach him for cash. It taught him something money couldn't buy. Something like his dream of becoming a mage. Wasn't that why he came here? Those words hit Jake like a punch to the gut. He remembered first meeting Sienna, vowing to be a great mage. Then his childhood, when friends followed him, all chasing the same dream. Finally waking up, Jake dropped to his knees and apologized. For real this time. He begged Sienna to guide him again. That night marked the end of the Black Magician Association and the start of redemption for those who found their way back. The next morning, just as Amy predicted, she and Sharon got called to the faculty room. Professor Thad was waiting to interrogate them about not reporting the incident sooner. The professors pressured them to tell the full truth. Amy and Sharon exchanged a silent look. With a sigh, Amy finally spoke up. She'd come clean. Sharon knew they couldn't hide this forever either. Amy's voice turned deep and serious as she said, "The truth is, Sharon is." Then her expression flipped to cheerful as she blurted out that Sharon was actually her boyfriend. The professors and Sherelle were stunned. jaws dropping in total disbelief. The scene replayed like something out of a dramatic retelling. Amy, trapped helplessly by the swirling wind magic, completely at its mercy, her only hope being that someone, anyone, would come to her rescue. Then, as if things couldn't get worse, a few shady figures started closing in on her, smirking like they already knew no one would bother saving her up in the middle of nowhere. But a prince on a white horse suddenly showed up, like some kind of hero straight out of a fairy tale. The guy was Sharon, apparently, and he made quick work of those thugs, taking them all down with just one kick like it was nothing. After that, he freed Amy like some damsel in distress, and straight up carried her like she was actual royalty. And just like that, his whole knight in shining armor act had Amy falling head over heels for him. Yeah, that was the story, and it spread like wildfire through the academy. The girls were eating it up, gushing over how romantic the whole thing was. And the one spreading it? None other than Cherelle herself. Cherelle backed up every detail, swearing she saw it all go down with her own eyes. But she didn't even notice Amy glaring daggers at her the whole time. In an instant, Cherelle became the target of Amy's fury once she realized exactly where all these rumors were coming from. The bulletin boards were plastered with gossip about Amy and Sharon's so-called relationship. Some were impressed, some were jealous, and some just straight up refused to believe it. Amy chewed Cherelle out for spreading nonsense, especially since her friend hadn't even been there to see what happened. But Cherelle just smirked. She didn't need to see it firsthand when Amy herself had basically confirmed the whole thing by not denying it. Either way, it all worked out in the end. Even Jake's gang stopped messing with her after that. Amy couldn't argue with the results. A few days earlier, during questioning, Professor Thad hadn't bought Amy's story at all. Sharon had just transferred to the academy, after all. Amy insisted it was true. She'd known Sharon since they were kids, and then reuniting at the academy. That was fate. She even turned to Sharon to confirm their relationship. Under the table, she kicked his leg as a not-so-subtle hint to play along if he wanted both of them to get out of this mess unscathed. Once Sharon backed her up, the instructors finally backed off, figuring it made sense that he'd rush to save her if they were that close. Cherelle was still buzzing with excitement, while Amy just got more and more uncomfortable. Today, there was a joint class, so Amy had a chance to see Sharon again. But she planned to just focus on studying like usual, which made Cherelle pout in disappointment. Amy figured she and Sharon had their own separate school lives to worry about. No need to mix things up more than they already had. That afternoon, inside the joint training building, Cherelle called out to Sharon like an overexcited fan. Sharon greeted them politely, like always. Cherelle teased him, asking if he'd missed Amy, while Amy herself felt a weird twinge of something that might have been jealousy. Amy walked over and told Sharon he could just call them by their names, no need for formalities. But Sharon refused, saying he still had to respect his seniors. Then he excused himself and headed back to his seat. Amy looked pissed, spinning on her heel and storming off. Cherelle couldn't help but think something was off about the whole dynamic. Meanwhile, the other students had started bullying Sharon out of sheer envy. They mocked him, saying he couldn't even use basic magic. It all started 2 days ago, when the whole class was gossiping about Sharon and Amy's, quote, relationship. At first, it was just normal chatter, nothing serious. But then some guy decided to show off Sharon's test scores to the entire class. The guy had 30 points across the board in every subject. That was all the excuse they needed to start harassing him, accusing him of only getting into the academy through connections. The guy kept egging everyone on, making sure the whole class turned against Sharon. And sure enough, it worked. Soon, everyone was convinced Sharon didn't deserve to be there. Maria just stayed quiet, too scared to say anything. When Sharon walked into class that day, the room went dead silent. The stares he got were ice cold. He tried talking to someone like usual, but the guy just straight up ignored him and walked away. Sharon didn't even need to ask what was going on. They made sure he heard every nasty thing they said about him. Back in the present, inside the joint training building, Sharon was completely isolated, every other student avoiding him like the plague. Someone even muttered about how disgusting it was when his spirit zone accidentally brushed against theirs during training. Then Professor Athela walked over. She asked how his deviate spirit zone training was coming along. She gave him a few pointers, trying to help him get a better handle on it. Then she asked if he wanted to try practicing in the image zone. But he hesitated when he noticed the way the other students were treating him. Sharan steeled himself to keep pushing forward toward his dream. He was going to give it his best shot. The Class 7 students shot him nasty looks, their eyes full of mockery as they watched him. There he was, Sharan, standing in front of the whole class, nerves creeping up on him. Professor Athela told him to demonstrate all 4 forms of his spirit zone, one by one. Even the Class 4 students, including Amy and Sherelle, had their eyes glued to him now. First, Sharan kicked things off by showing off his defense form. The Class 4 kids were impressed by the 144 angles in his defense form. Even Amy was shocked. This was way stronger than when he'd fought Jake the other day. Then, flawlessly, Sharan shifted into his second form without a single mistake. Next up was the third form, a hybrid crossover style. Professor Athela couldn't help but smile at how far he'd come. Sharan paused for a second, bracing himself to attempt the deviate form, something he'd never pulled off before. He started shaping his spirit zone, but as he tried to separate it from his body, his focus began slipping. He fought hard to keep his mind clear, but the Class 7 students deliberately laughed at him, trying to mess with his head. The taunts kept coming, ringing in the air, and bit by bit, his concentration wavered. His spirit zone started going haywire. Amy and Sherelle were confused since it had been stable just moments ago. They figured something must have happened that they didn't catch. Sharan was drowning in negative emotions now. Memories of every insult, every bit of ridicule he'd faced since childhood, flooded his mind. He couldn't understand why everyone seemed to want him to fail. Was watching him struggle really that entertaining? Out of nowhere, a voice snapped him out of it, a warning not to waste time on useless thoughts. The mysterious guy told him to focus on what needed to be done and stop doubting himself. He reminded Sharan of his goal, his dream of becoming a mage. Sharan snapped back to reality. With renewed determination, he roared that he would become a mage. Suddenly, a surge of energy burst from him, stabilizing his spirit zone again. The Class 4 students were blown away by the sudden turnaround. Then, with everything he had, Sharan forced his spirit zone to separate from his body. He screamed, fighting to keep his mind from collapsing. Meanwhile, Professor Sienna was busy reviewing the Black Magician faction's violations. She still couldn't believe Sharan's mental strength had matched 6 Class 5 students. Out of nowhere, someone came looking for her. It turned out it was Professor Athela, reporting that Sharan had finally pulled off the deviate form. His deviate form spirit zone actually worked, even if it only lasted 4 seconds. Professor Sienna felt smug about being right about Sharan, while Athela had a favor to ask. Sienna already knew what Athela wanted and agreed to handle it. A few days later, during Professor Sienna's chemistry lecture, she wrapped up the lesson and told the students to take good notes. Then she dropped a bombshell announcement. She called Sharan to stand up, and just like that, she declared he was skipping 2 grades straight to Class 5. One of the girls in class immediately lost it. She couldn't accept it. She yelled about how Sharan, who couldn't even cast a single spell, didn't deserve this. Professor Sienna was baffled and asked Sharan if it was true. Under the weight of everyone's glares, Sharan admitted he really couldn't use magic, but Sienna backed him up. Since Class 6 wasn't about spells anyway, it shouldn't matter. The guy who'd been the ringleader of Sharan's bullies stood up, furious. He accused Sienna of nepotism and favoritism. Soon, the whole class joined in, protesting loudly. Sienna sighed and decided to call a faculty meeting to settle things. Back in her office, Professor Sienna was still mulling over what happened. Then, a student walked in. It was Maria, and she had something to say about the whole mess. Maria finally opened up about the bullying that had started a week ago, explaining how students from other classes had completely ignored Sharan at first. Then, just a few days ago, those same kids began gossiping about him right in the open, not even trying to hide it. Things got worse when they started deliberately disrupting his study sessions in the library. Maria broke down in tears, overwhelmed by the unfairness of it all, which was why she decided to report everything now. Finally, Professor Sienna got the full picture of what was really going on. Sienna thanked Maria for having the courage to speak up. That night, Sharon was still in the library, studying late like usual. By then, only 2 people were left, him and one other girl. They exchanged quick greetings before Sharon headed back to his dorm. On the way, he found himself lost in thought. Temeron's words echoed in his mind, reminding him to stay patient until the very end. Sharon made a silent promise to himself. He'd stick it out at the academy, even if nobody ever acknowledged him. He'd do it for the people who still believed in him, and for his parents, who he loved more than anything. Back at the dorm, the building was dark except for one lone light still on, Chiron's. He'd just finished showering when suddenly, a knock at the door. For a second, he wondered if the bullies were messing with him again. But to his surprise, it was Professor Sienna, asking if he was still awake. Sharon let her in, noticing she looked like she'd just come from the baths too. He offered her a seat and quickly made some tea. Sienna glanced at the textbooks scattered around and picked up one of his recent exam papers. At first, she thought his grades were off, but then it hit her. He was trying to improve every subject at once. Awkwardly, Chiron sat across from her, curious why she'd come so late. Sienna didn't beat around the bush. She brought up the bullying. Chiron admitted it, but told her not to worry about it. As much as he hated the situation, there wasn't much he could do about their hatred. Sienna pressed him. Didn't he resent his classmates even a little? Of course he was upset, but in the grand scheme of things, they were just 40 people. He believed someone out there would understand him eventually. That answer made Sienna pause, like she'd just realized something important. After a moment, she excused herself, saying it was late and he should get some rest. The next day, Professor Sienna called a faculty meeting and proposed promoting Chiron to Class 5. The other teachers were stunned, barely able to believe his progress. One argued they shouldn't waste his talent and should move him up immediately. But as usual, Professor Thad, being his usual stubborn self, objected, which only annoyed Sienna more. The headmaster asked Thad to explain himself. Thad admitted Chiron had skill, but without any actual magic, the other students would never accept him. Sienna, now fully irritated, clarified that Chiron had been focusing on all subjects at once, leaving no time for magic yet. Thad claimed he didn't care about Chiron's methods. He just thought Sienna was playing favorites. That set Sienna off, accusing Thad of deliberately holding back a gifted student. The two went back and forth, arguing like always. The other teachers just sighed. Those two were like oil and water, never getting along. Eventually, the headmaster shut it down. He admitted both sides had valid points, so he decided to test the students himself. The following morning, Class 7 students rushed to the announcement board to check the new posting. It detailed a promotion exam, a magic competition focused on teleportation. The winner would skip straight to Class 5. Reactions were mixed. Some saw it as a golden opportunity, while others panicked over the teleportation requirement. Then Chiron appeared, weaving through the crowd toward the board. He stared at the notice, seeing his chance to finally reach Class 5. After that shocking announcement, the students started buzzing about the real reason behind the competition, how it was all because of bullying fueled by jealousy. Amy overheard the gossip and finally pieced together why Chiron had been avoiding her. It was to keep her out of the mess. Sherelle admitted that Class 7 were always like that, recalling how she'd almost been bullied herself before luckily moving up a grade. Furious, Amy decided to march straight to Chiron to teach him a lesson, and maybe take down every 7th-year student while she was at it. Sherelle jumped in to stop her, warning that Amy's outburst would only humiliate Chiron even more. Amy paused mid-step. Sherelle's logic actually made sense. Sherelle suggested a better idea. Amy should go help Chiron master teleportation magic instead. Amy brushed it off, claiming she was too busy cramming for her exams. Night fell, bathing Alpheus Academy in the soft glow of moonlight. The rustling of leaves was interrupted by footsteps crunching across branches, disturbing the quiet. A shadowy figure darted through the trees before perching on a branch, eyes locked on a dorm window still lit by lamplight. Turns out, it was Amy. Too proud to admit she was worried about her boyfriend, she leaped onto the windowsill, landing right in front of Sharon. Clamping a hand over his mouth, she cut off his startled yelp. With a psychopathic grin, she planned to educate him for keeping his struggles from her. Except, none of that was real, just her imagination running wild. When she actually reached the window, she found Professor Sienna deep in conversation with Sharon instead. Professor Sienna spotted Amy immediately, while Sharon choked on his tea at the sight of her. The professor scolded Amy for sneaking into a guy's room at night, but Amy fumbled to explain the misunderstanding. Professor Sienna assumed they'd been distant lately because Amy was secretly visiting him after hours. Suspicious, Amy grilled the professor about why she was in Sharon's room. Sienna claimed it was just to discuss the competition. Sharon handed Amy some tea, which she absent-mindedly praised, before snapping back to reality. Tea time could wait. Once things calmed down, Amy and Sharon sat side by side, sipping tea while Professor Sienna circled back to the competition topic. Amy disagreed with the Academy's decision, arguing teleportation magic was way too risky for beginners. Professor Sienna agreed, but admitted she was overruled. The headmaster had pushed the idea. Sharon, clueless about the dangers, asked for details. Amy broke it down. Teleportation magic converted the body into light particles. The theory, called photonization, involved moving faster than space and time itself. Sharon's eyes widened as he realized the risk. Photonization left behind trace body mass, and a single collision could be catastrophic. Sienna praised his quick grasp of the concept. Amy, meanwhile, side-eyed their sudden bonding. Not about to let her boyfriend get stolen, Amy explained the competition would be held in an open area. Sharon blinked, confused. He didn't know the place. Amy smirked and pointed upward. The twin-peaked mountain arena, named Bridge, that cannot be crossed. The rules were simple. Teleport from one peak to the other. If no one made it, the winner would be whoever covered the most distance. But Amy's real concern was the cutthroat competition. Students might sabotage each other. She worried Sharon would be their prime target. Sharon sighed, hating the idea of fighting his classmates, especially if someone got hurt. Professor Sienna apologized, regretting how her ambition had dragged him into this. To make up for it, she offered to personally train him. Amy's jealousy flared. She also volunteered to teach him. With a dramatic vow, she promised to coach him properly. But Sienna shut it down, reminding Amy she had advanced exams to prepare for. Sharon was impressed. Not just anyone could take those brutal tests. Internally, Amy cursed Sharon for unintentionally pressuring her into advanced classes. The room turned into a tug-of-war between Amy and Sienna over who'd train Sharon. Amy finally tossed the decision to Sharon, pick her or the professor. Sharon awkwardly smiled and refused both, insisting he'd figure it out alone. The rejection left both Amy and Professor Sienna stunned and seriously disappointed. Amy couldn't wrap her head around why Sharon had turned down their joint offer. Sharon wanted Amy to focus on her exams and didn't want to burden her with his own struggles. Amy felt a little flustered by Sharon's unexpected consideration. It caught her off guard. Seeing how determined Sharon was, Professor Sienna finally gave him the green light. Sharon made sure to thank Professor Sienna for being so understanding about his situation. Before leaving, Professor Sienna warned Amy not to make the same mistake again. After the scolding, Amy let out a sigh of relief and plopped down on Sharon's bed, surprised the professor had let her off so easily this time. Suddenly, it hit Amy. She'd totally gotten swept up in the moment. She quickly stood up to leave, but not before Sharon thanked her for worrying about him. On her way out, Amy finally asked why Sharon had been avoiding her lately. Sharon admitted that Amy was his goal all along, which, of course, made her misinterpret things entirely. But he clarified, ever since he first arrived, he'd seen her name at the top of the rankings. He was determined to catch up to her, pushing himself to his absolute limits. Out of nowhere, Amy snapped at Sharon for constantly calling her senior. The idea of being chased by some overachieving junior trying to surpass her. Absolutely ridiculous. Just as Amy was about to storm off, Sharon called her back. This time, just by her name. Amy was stunned. She hadn't expected him to adjust so quickly. With a serious, confident look, Sharon promised he'd catch up to her in no time. Amy shot back that he'd better hurry. She might graduate before he even got close. Sharon was dead set on winning this competition no matter what. They only had 1 month left before it began. The next day, after classes ended, students were scattered around the school grounds. Everyone was still buzzing about the competition, especially the 20 participants who'd signed up. Then they spotted Sharon hauling a massive stack of books. Of course, every single one was on photonization theory. He was fully committed to training on his own this time. For a second, doubt crept in, but he shook it off. He had to stay focused. Even if he hadn't grown up learning magic like everyone else, he was sure hard work would be enough to outshine the others. Meanwhile, Mark had already mastered teleportation magic. His private instructor couldn't stop praising how naturally gifted he was. Mark played it cool, deflecting the compliment right back at his teacher. He'd been nervous at first, but turns out the spell came way too easily to him. The instructor urged Mark to keep practicing. If he perfected this, no one would stand a chance against him in the exams. Mark grinned, already imagining himself getting promoted to Class 5. Then a servant reported back to him about Chiron studying magic alone from books. Mark was confused. He'd assumed Chiron would use his connections to hire a tutor. Back in his room, Chiron kept studying day and night. He'd memorized every theory. Now, it was all about putting them into practice. That night, Chiron headed to one of the Academy's training fields to test his magic. He stretched, psyching himself up for his first real attempt. Closing his eyes, he steadied his breathing and focused. Then, he channeled everything he'd learned into his spirit zone. He realized the only thing blocking omnipotent and omniscience was himself. So he had to erase his own limitations. As he succeeded, his body began glowing. Photonization was active. Chiron took a deep breath and attempted his first teleportation. The next morning in the 7th grade classroom, the students were shocked and confused, all staring at Chiron. His face was wrapped in bandages from injuries, clear signs of a failed magic practice during yesterday's training. Even so, he had no other choice but to keep pushing his body to its limits. Failure after failure piled up, and the pain was undeniable. Yet he kept grinding. Before he knew it, there were only 8 days left until the competition. He still hadn't successfully cast teleportation magic, but he meticulously noted every mistake and setback. The other students watched his progress, while Chiron kept troubleshooting each problem one by one. 5 days left. Still failing. 4 days left. Still no luck. Until the day before the competition, Chiron looked completely drained from overtraining. But he'd fixed every mistake he could. There was nothing left to adjust. His vision blurred. He was hitting his absolute limit. With one last try, he poured every ounce of energy into the spell. Suddenly, his body transformed into a bright flash of light, darting forward. When he landed, he stumbled, crashing to the ground. But strangely, he felt no pain. Face still pressed against the dirt, he grinned, thrilled he'd finally pulled off teleportation. He wanted to try again immediately, but exhaustion knocked him out cold. The next morning, Mark stood by his dorm window, staring into the distance. His instructor approached, asking how he was feeling. Mark, with confidence, convinced today would be his ticket to the 5th class. Over at Alphaeus Magic Academy's main building, Maria was just heading to class. Mark called out to her from behind. She froze in fear, trying to avoid him, but Mark blocked her path. He knew she'd reported their bullying to Professor Sienna. Maria dropped her bag in panic as Mark admitted he'd seen her in the faculty room. He walked off, promising to, quote, deal with her after the competition. Maria collapsed in tears, dreading the retaliation she'd face once Mark returned. Meanwhile, Mark joined his classmates to finalize their plan against Sharon. His friends had already schemed to ambush Chiron mid-competition. Mark guaranteed them high-ranking positions, thanks to his father's influence in the Magic Association. At the exam site atop the Twin Peaks, Sienna handed the judges the participants' info. Students from other classes gathered to watch. Even the headmaster showed up, curious about Chiron's skills. Professor Athela, waiting at the opposite peak, saw the headmaster's signal and prepped the students. Some kids were visibly nervous, unnerved by the terrifying height. The fear of falling to their deaths haunted the weaker-willed ones. Mark asked his buddy if they'd seen Chiron, but no one had. Mark was stunned. There was no way Chiron would skip this. Back at the dorm, Chiron was still dead asleep until a tiny ant crawled on his face, jolting him awake. He panicked, realizing he might have overslept and missed the competition. Chiron couldn't spot Chiron anywhere, which sent Amy into a panic. Without hesitation, Amy snatched the binoculars from her best friend's hands to search for him herself. Amy assumed Chiron had failed to master teleportation magic, and that's why he was missing. Professor Athela laid out the competition rules, simple as could be. The students just had to run, and whoever covered the farthest distance would win. The moment the students realized they'd have to jump off a mountain, their confidence wavered. Professor Thad didn't waste time. He told the hesitant students to back out if they couldn't handle it. He warned them that the path of magic wasn't safe. Half-hearted determination wouldn't get them anywhere, and death was always a real risk. The students who'd been trembling earlier suddenly straightened up, their resolve hardening. Meanwhile, Mark just scoffed under his breath, mocking the ones who chickened out as useless. Professor Othello ordered the students to take their positions. The exam was about to begin. Out of nowhere, Chiron came sprinting into view from a distance. Nobody expected Chiron to actually show up for the competition, especially not covered in bruises like that. Chiron apologized for being late and asked for permission to join the exam. Amy, though, only got angrier seeing him arrive at the last second. Her heart shattered when she saw her boyfriend's body battered with injuries. Professor Athela gave Chiron the green light, but told him to hurry into position. The headmaster had already fired the red signal. A couple of students helped Chiron get set up, completely unaware it was all part of a trap meant for him. Chiron closed his eyes, focusing. He was ready to give this competition everything he had. Professor Athela started the countdown. The students crouched into their running stances, ready to bolt. The moment the signal went off, everyone took off like rockets toward the edge of the cliff, including Chiron. The key to winning wasn't about being the fastest. It was about who could jump the closest to the cliff's edge. As the students neared the drop, one of them panicked and activated teleportation magic early. That student jumped way too soon, nowhere near the edge. The others lost their nerve too, following suit with rush teleportations. Even Mark's friends started freaking out, ready to bail early. Mark was furious at his cowardly buddy. He kept running, determined to push as far as possible. But the sheer height of the cliff got to him, crushing his confidence. In the end, Mark caved and teleported just like the rest. But Chiron kept running. He didn't even glance at the others who'd already jumped. The two students assigned to watch him finally gave up, unable to match his insane determination, and teleported early. Chiron's madness carried him all the way to the very edge of the cliff. Nobody could believe the sheer guts this kid had. No one his age should have had nerves of steel like that. Without hesitation, Chiron leaped off the cliff. No photonization, just pure, reckless abandon as his feet left the ground. A year ago at Rian's place, he asked Chiron if he wasn't scared of dying when fighting his dad. Chiron read from a book that fear was just part of human imagination, something people projected based on whatever situation they were in. Like, if someone jumped off a cliff, they'd only actually die when they hit the ground, and before that happened, there was still time to figure a way out. Rian, being kinda dense, didn't get Chiron's point and immediately called him stupid. Obviously, jumping off a cliff meant certain death. Fast forward to the present, and Chiron was using that same theory to pull off mid-air photonization. Of course, it wasn't as easy as it sounded. Fear and anxiety could still creep up at any moment. But Chiron fought to keep his focus. His body started glowing intensely before he shot forward. He chased after the other students ahead of him, getting closer, until he blew past every single one. Mark couldn't believe his eyes. He wondered just how far Chiron had jumped off the cliff this time. The crowd of students cheered, hyping up the competition participants. The fifth years noticed Chiron's insane move, launching himself from the cliff's edge. Chiron was shook. This was Chiron's first time using magic, and he was already pulling this off. Mark pushed harder to catch up, pissed at how his own team was performing. Even though he gave it everything he had, Chiron kept gaining on him. Meanwhile, on the other side of the cliff, Maria was walking off somewhere alone. She remembered the bullying she'd endured, her grades dropping, and her teacher yelling at her. Maria hated competition. No way was she letting Mark win. Back in the arena, one student started panicking about falling to his death. Sure enough, he lost focus and plummeted. He screamed for the instructors, begging to quit the competition. Everyone just laughed at the guy's dramatic meltdown. Turns out, giant fans were set up at the bottom of the cliff the whole time. They slowed falls, making it impossible to crash. Mark kept chasing Sharon, hoping he'd tire out eventually. But nope, Sharon looked like he could go all day. Professor Athela admitted Sharon was a natural. His teleportation rhythm was as steady as a machine. Professor Sienna clearly pleased, while the clueless Professor Thad just looked annoyed. Sherelle was stunned Sharon had mastered compulsion. She never expected him to learn an advanced skill this fast. But Amy disagreed. Most mages train to turn subconscious actions into conscious control. Sharon was different. It was like he had full command over his subconscious itself. Mark felt himself hitting his limit. He yelled at his team to execute their plan. It was risky, but his teammate didn't have a choice. In a flash, he switched his teleportation path. Sharon noticed the shift in rhythm from the sounds around him. Then, out of nowhere, someone teleported right in front of him. Sharon slammed the brakes on his momentum to avoid a collision. But then, another student cut him off from behind. The guy was ready to take Sharon down with him. Sharon realized the others were out to get him, but he managed to dodge just in time. But losing focus for even a second sent him tumbling down hard. His messed up tempo left him completely exhausted, way beyond normal fatigue. Refusing to pass out, he forced himself to stay conscious and sharp. He pulled himself together, activated his photonization again, and got back in the race. The students who tried to sabotage him couldn't believe their eyes. That's when they realized Sharon wasn't some average guy. He was a freakishly talented mage. Meanwhile, the 5th class student noticed something weird was going on with the race's direction. One of them straight up admitted they'd planned to take Sharon out. Another student, though, wasn't buying it. That student was a rookie who tried explaining to the others. He pointed out how one student had blocked Sharon's path while another rammed him from behind. The rookie was convinced that if Sharon hadn't messed with his own tempo, something terrible would have happened. But then he bragged that he could have dodged it easily. The others rolled their eyes at his cocky attitude. And Aruki was right about one thing. There was no way the professors hadn't noticed. After the incident, Mark took the lead, leaving Sharon behind. But Sharon wasn't giving up. He doubled down, sharpening his focus even more. He changed tactics, speeding up his tempo. But it drained his stamina fast. The whole class was rooting for Mark to reach the finish line. Amy worried Sharon was pushing his body past its limits with magic, while Sherelle whined about wanting to see the action. Then, out of nowhere, something shot toward Mark's teleportation path, throwing him off completely. A steel ring trap launched at Mark, but he barely avoided it. The professors panicked. This wasn't part of the plan. Mechanical traps suddenly activate, targeting both Mark and Sharon. Sienna ordered Thad to check the machine room immediately. She even suggested the headmaster shut the whole competition down. The headmaster took a second to weigh the situation. Then he barked at the order to cancel the event. A signal flare shot into the air, officially calling it off. Meanwhile, Professor Thad stormed toward the machine room, ready to chew out the guard for screwing up. But when he got there, the door was locked from the inside. Sensing trouble, Thad summoned fire magic, ready to blast his way in. Then he felt someone just sitting on the other side of the door. He threatened to blow the whole room up if they didn't open it. A desperate girl's voice told him to go ahead. She was tired of living anyway. He recognized that shaky voice. It was Maria, trembling with fear. Thad warned her she'd regret it if she didn't open the door. Maria didn't care. Her life was already hell because of this competition. Death didn't scare her. Finally, Thad understood what had happened. He let Maria do whatever she wanted. After all, the headmaster had already canceled everything. Back on the field, Sharon and Mark stood frozen, unsure what to do next. Exhausted, Sharon locked eyes with Mark, and neither was backing down. So they kept going, ignoring the cancellation. They charged straight through the active traps, determined to finish. Professor Sienna could only cover her mouth in horror. The headmaster was pissed at their stupidity. Amy was freaking out because the active level 10 obstacle traps were no joke. These things were specifically designed for specialists. As time dragged on, more and more traps kept activating, turning the whole place into a death maze. Each trap had its own speed and shape, making them unpredictable as hell. Sharon kept pushing forward, dodging every trap like his life depended on it. Mark, desperate to win, was hell-bent on getting as far as possible before getting eliminated. He wanted to impress the headmaster and professors, to prove once and for all that he was the real deal. Pulling off some slick moves to avoid the traps, he couldn't help but feel proud of himself. Then, out of nowhere, Sharon realized Mark was heading straight into danger. Meanwhile, in the monitoring room, the screens showed the level 10 traps still active, glowing ominously. Maria couldn't wrap her head around why the academy would pit students against each other like this. Was this really what competition meant? Professor Thad tried explaining things to her, but Maria wasn't buying any of it. She didn't want to hear any sugar-coated excuses, no matter how nicely they were phrased. So Professor Thad hit her with a question. Had she ever heard of a genius student named Thad? Maria admitted she'd never heard of him. The professor then dropped a bombshell. He'd been stuck in the 5th grade for 5 whole years at this very academy. He'd even gotten captured by the headmaster once, who gave him some hard truths. The biggest rule for a mage? Never compare yourself to others. And yet, that's exactly what Mark was doing. Obsessed with winning at all costs. Just then, a net trap shot out, aiming straight for him. Mark finally realized he'd gone the wrong way, but it was too late. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. In pure panic, he screamed for help like a total coward. The professors could only watch, resigned to the tragic fate about to befall him. Amy and Sherelle couldn't even bear to look at the horrifying scene unfolding. Right as Mark was about to lose all hope, a hand yanked him backward. Whoever it was pulled him clear out of the trap's path. Of course, Sharon wasn't about to let a classmate die like that. The Class 7 students couldn't believe Sharon would actually save Mark. One kid even questioned why he'd bother, only to get chewed out by another who reminded him this was a human life. Even the girl who'd bullied Sharon before was stunned by his insane maneuver. Sharon kept dragging Mark away from the trap, but Mark flailed around like an idiot. It was seriously pissing Sharon off, but he forced himself to stay focused and think of a way out. After struggling like crazy, Sharon finally broke free from the net trap's range. But the traps, designed to hunt down participants, started chasing them at terrifying speed. The Class 5 kids erupted in cheers, urging Sharon to run faster. Seeing the traps closing in like hungry beasts, Sharon racked his brain for a solution. With no path forward, he made a split-second decision. He turned back. Haruki grinned, loving Sharon's call. Sometimes, you gotta backtrack when there's no other choice. Witnessing Sharon's insane skills, the Class 7 students finally realized how wrong they'd been about him. One of the girls started cheering for him, genuinely this time. Soon, the whole class was rooting for him, their support totally sincere. Haruki was thrilled. The atmosphere had done a complete 180. Sherelle was beyond impressed, and Amy agreed. This was exactly why Sharon pushed himself so hard. All he wanted was to master magic properly. Professor Thad then dropped some wisdom. Competitions were just tools to help people reach the finish line faster. But once you crossed that line, you were still just a mage in the end. He promised Maria he'd help her find her way back. Maria, finally seeing her mistakes, broke down in tears and apologized. Then, out of nowhere, the headmaster announced the competition would resume. He took full responsibility for whatever happened next. Back to Sharon, who was busy analyzing the trap in front of him. The thing moved like it was alive, shifting in unpredictable, chaotic patterns. Sharon activated the spirit zone, scanning for an escape route like a human radar. He spotted a path. If he bent his teleportation route just right, he could slip through. Without wasting a second, he bolted straight into the trap's center, zigzag teleporting like a man possessed. The next obstacle is easy. He cleared it like it was nothing. The Class 7 kids were speechless, their jaws on the floor. How was this guy so far beyond them? He moved so fast that Mark passed out Professor Sienna, and the others were stunned, watching Sharon pull off moves they'd only seen in theory. The headmaster was torn. This was getting dangerous, but part of him wanted to see how far Sharon could go. What weirded him out, Sharon showed zero pride or hunger, just cold, detached focus. Trap after trap, Chiron plowed through, unfazed by the escalating insanity. Professor Athela noticed it too. No fear, no obsession, just pure calculation. His spirit zone density hit 99.9%. His mind working like a supercomputer on overdrive. Even Athela, usually calm, was sweating. This level of talent was dangerous in a live scenario. The traps multiplied, converging on Chiron in waves. But he still saw an exit, clear as day. Another trap down, like it was just another Tuesday. Then came the nightmare. Layered, net-like barriers, each deadlier than the last. Chiron breezed through anyway, silently praying Mark stayed unconscious for this part. His teleportation was so fast, light bent around him like warped photons. Iruki lost it. Chiron seriously pulling off the legendary rainbow drop, that insane technique where he split teleportation into thousandths of a second. The other Class 5 kids gaped. How could anyone calculate that Iruki shut that down fast? Chiron wasn't calculating. He was feeling it. In other words, Chiron was a freaking genius who had no clue he was a genius. Chiron cleared the net trap, but something felt off. The trap components started merging, swirling together. Then, a goddamn dragon-like trap materialized in front of him. The professors panicked, yelling at Chiron to abort. Now. Sienna, done with this mess, stormed off to search for Thad. Unexpectedly, Mark woke up. The first thing he saw was a dragon trap opening its jaws to swallow them whole. Mark flailed like a coward, but Chiron didn't blink, just crunched numbers for an escape. Sienna burst into the control room, scanning for Thad. Thad stepped out with Maria, confused why Sienna looked ready to murder him. Sienna didn't explain, just screamed at him to shut the traps down. Thad paled. He had no idea Chiron and Mark were still in there. Cursing, he sprinted back to the controls, slamming the emergency off switch. Amy and Cherelle were hysterical, watching the dragon trap lunge for Chiron and Mark. Even the headmaster could only watch helplessly as chaos unfolded. In the final moments before impact, Chiron steadied himself, pushing down the rising panic. His focus was insane, way beyond what any beginner mage his age should have been capable of. He split the teleportation path into 100 fragments, slipping past the first obstacle like it was nothing. 6 sharp turns later, he hadn't messed up once. Flawless. Then he'd screwed up. A trap blocked their exit, and there was no way around it. Amy and Cherelle freaked out as they realized Chiron had walked right into a dragon snare. But then, out of nowhere, a crazy fast flash zipped through, pulling off an insane maneuver. Just like that, Chiron was free, slipping out of the dragon's trap. The 7th-year students rushed over to him immediately. Even the 5th years were there, staring in disbelief that he'd actually pulled it off. Against all odds, Chiron had gotten Mark to safety. Students crowded around, checking on him. Professor Athela stood frozen, completely speechless. She bolted soon after, probably to report the whole situation to the headmaster. Chiron still hadn't moved, too busy gulping down air to fight off the exhaustion crushing his lungs. The other students were terrified. This guy had just pulled off specialist-level magic just for the advanced class. Chiron admitted he'd thought he was gonna die back there. That just confused everyone even more. They'd assumed he was some kind of prodigy. Real power doesn't need to show off. The students circled him, congratulating him, some praising him, others finally admitting he deserved that 5th-class promotion. Professor Athela reported everything to Sienna, who was pissed she'd missed Chiron's insane stunt because of Thad. With things calming down, Sienna finally updated the headmaster, but the headmaster seemed lost in his own thoughts, barely reacting. Secretly, he was grateful to Chiron for showing him something truly extraordinary. Thad knew exactly what the headmaster was feeling. He stepped in, nudging the headmaster to get on with the ceremony. For the first time in forever, the headmaster felt envy. Chiron's pure, unfiltered passion for magic was something he'd lost long ago. His heart hadn't pounded this hard in years. Finally, the headmaster gave his speech and announced the exam results. Official word came down. Chiron was moving up to the 5th class. Mark pushed through the crowd, and everyone braced for a protest. But instead, he looked pale, completely shaken. He'd just witnessed a real genius in action. Mark bowed deeply, apologizing and swearing to take full responsibility for what he'd done. The rest of Chiron's classmates followed suit, ready to accept whatever punishment came their way. Chiron, expressionless, had expected nothing less. Now the bullies were scared, even calling him Senior. Chiron frowned as Amy suddenly turned to leave without even saying goodbye. Seeing Chiron prove himself lit a fire in Amy. She was more determined than ever to push forward. Out of nowhere, Chiron shouted Amy's name at the top of his lungs, startling both her and Chiron. In front of everyone, he declared he'd catch up to her soon, making the students misinterpret his boldness, when really he was just delirious from exhaustion. Amy and Chiron were totally caught off guard by his bluntness, and Chiron wouldn't remember any of this when he woke up later. With that, Chiron was officially transferred to the 5th class, Professor Siena's domain. Meanwhile, Professor Othello was still baffled. When Chiron entered the dragon maze, she hadn't sensed a thing. The next morning, sunlight bathed the academy, bringing a fresh wave of hope for the students who had owned up to their mistakes. Even so, the incident was still going to be judged by the headmaster and the professors. The first student to face judgment was Maria, who admitted to all her mistakes and was ready to accept her punishment. But Chiron, Mark, and Brad, the guys Maria had put to sleep with her magic, all agreed they didn't want her punished. Mark even took the blame, saying he was the one who had pushed Maria to this point. The other involved students also confessed, including the ones who had messed with Chiron during the exam. The headmaster was proud of their growth as future mages, but punishment was still necessary. Chiron even asked to be punished too, since he'd acted recklessly during the cancelled competition. The headmaster rubbed his temples, trying to figure out what kind of punishment would fit. Meanwhile, Thad was quietly pleased. This whole situation was exactly what the headmaster had wanted. These students, striving to become honorable mages, had finally taken responsibility. Thad sighed. Even after graduating, the headmaster was still teaching him lessons. In the end, the headmaster made his decision. Everyone involved would face consequences. The students looked somber, not because of the punishment, but because they truly regretted their actions. Mark bowed deeply, sincerely apologizing to Maria. Professor Sienna was shocked. She'd never seen the entire student body punished like this before. Maria and Mark got a 2-month suspension, while the others got one. As for Chiron, his punishment was collecting apology letters from the students. Professor Sienna never expected the usually calm Chiron to have such a competitive streak. Meanwhile, Chiron, completely unaware of the talk about him, was fast asleep, exhausted from everything. In his dreams, he relived the moment he'd conquered the dragon maze. He kept pushing forward, fearless, completely focused. Erasing his own presence, he saw only the reality of the moment. Breaking past all limits, he felt unstoppable. Then suddenly, he was falling into emptiness, panic gripping him. He jolted awake, hearing piano music drifting from outside his room. Chiron couldn't remember anything after waking up. He wanted to return the notes he'd borrowed from Amy to study teleportation magic. But then something else caught his eye. The first class of the day happened to be a joint session. Chiron asked how Chiron was doing, while Amy got flustered when he approached her. Chiron was confused why Chiron was carrying so many apples. He explained they were for Amy. Amy was baffled. She liked cherries, not apples. When she checked her own notes, she realized she'd drawn cherries that looked more like apples. Embarrassed by her messy sketches, Amy quickly walked away. Chiron just stood there, confused by her reaction. Later that day, Amy took her advancement exam and passed without any issues. A month later, the suspended students returned to school, greeting Chiron with newfound respect. They'd even started saving seats for him during joint classes. Then, a female student suddenly slid into the seat next to him. It was Sherelle, teasing him about being lonely without Amy around. Sherelle admitted she just wanted a quiet life, but watching Chiron and Amy had fired her up. Chiron was shocked when Sherelle mentioned Amy's plan to join the military. He thought that was way too dangerous. But Sherelle wasn't worried. Amy specialized in sniping magic, so she'd be fighting from the back lines. After class, Sherelle and Chiron went their separate ways. As usual, Chiron headed off to train alone, until another student called out to him. The guy was Need, an extroverted classmate from Sharon's class group who always dragged him into conversations. Everyone in Class 5 had their own unique magic specialties. Then 2 more students showed up, greeting them from behind. They pulled Sharon and Need into a serious discussion. Sharon watched them argue, but had no clue what they were even talking about. For a second, he worried he'd get bullied again if he didn't keep up. Then they finally got to the point, debating which professor they liked best, Sienna or Athela. Sharon felt ridiculous. All that stress over something so trivial. Sharon had assumed Need would scold him and the others for asking silly, unnecessary questions. But to his surprise, Need turned out to be the most enthusiastic one, fully supporting Professor Sienna. The group kept debating with their favorite professors, each siding with their preferred mentor. Out of nowhere, they suddenly asked for Sharon's opinion, catching him completely off guard. Sharon froze, unsure how to respond. Both professors were figures he deeply respected. Just as he was about to finally voice his thoughts, both his friends walked away, leaving him standing there, utterly confused. Sharon couldn't help but feel rejected, like his indecisiveness made him an outsider. Need quickly dismissed that idea. The real reason is Iruki had strolled over, casually asking what they were discussing. Need brushed it off as unimportant and immediately introduced Sharon to Iruki instead. Iruki introduced himself, mentioning he already knew who Sharon was. Sharon felt like he'd heard Iruki's voice before. Then it hit him, a memory from the past. Back when he'd failed to execute the Spirit Zone Deviate form after being mocked by classmates, and a mysterious voice had snapped him out of it. Sharon quickly shook Iruki's hand, thanking him for that moment. Out of nowhere, Iruki bluntly called him the boring type. The random insult left Sharon baffled. Need jumped in to smooth things over, while Iruki just looked puzzled, insisting it was supposed to be a compliment. As he walked away, Iruki tossed a warning over his shoulder, saying that Class 5 was full of weirdos. Need apologized for Iruki's behavior, but Sharon just shrugged it off, admitting the guy was unique. Need explained that Iruki was a genius with 0 social skills, brilliant in one way, utterly bizarre in others. Without warning, Iruki climbed onto the stage and headed straight for the image zone. Need groaned, already foreseeing chaos, while Sharon watched, curious about what Iruki was planning. Iruki summoned his spirit zone effortlessly. Then, in seconds, he shaped it into a flawless deviate form like it was nothing. The form hovered above the students, who stared in awe at his skill. Grinning mischievously, Iruki snapped his fingers. The spirit zone split into multiple targets. Professor Athela's eyes widened. She knew trouble was coming and yelled at Iruki to stop. Iruki ignored her, calmly muttering an incantation in an icy tone. The students barely had time to react before realizing it was an explosion spell. They bolted. Iruki's deviate form shot straight through the targets he'd created. The colliding energies erupted into a blinding flash. Boom! The shockwave knocked everyone back, though, luckily, no one was hurt. Sharon could only stare, speechless at the insanity he'd just witnessed. Iruki, acting like he'd done something cool, gave Sharon a lazy wave before. Professor Athela dragged him away, scolding him for yet another reckless stunt. Sharon was still trying to figure out what Iruki's whole deal was. Iruki was the weirdest kid in Class 5, socially clueless but undeniably brilliant in one niche. His genius lay in mastering a single discipline to perfection. Iruki was the king of physics calculations, able to predict outcomes within a 0 to 100-degree temperature range. He could even calculate the exact day and time 40,000 years in the future. But then there was the time he bombed a poetry-based history exam. When asked about a poem describing falling leaves, Iruki wrote a mathematical breakdown of descent rates based on leaf shape. The teacher, thinking he was mocking the test, gave him a 0. Need added that professors used to take turns handling Iruki before giving up entirely. What shocked Need, though, was Iruki taking an interest in Sharon, which, honestly, made Sharon a little nervous. Just then, a girl from another class approached Sharon. She nervously invited him to join her research club. Sharon politely declined, saying he needed to focus on improving his grades first. The girl took it well, smiling before walking off. Need sighed, mentioning how prestigious her club was. Sharon half-jokingly told Need to join instead if he wasn't already in one. Need casually revealed he actually led his own small research club. Sharon's mood dropped, realizing how far behind he was compared to his friends. Need reassured him. His club was tiny, just 2 members. That piqued Sharon's curiosity. Need led Sharon to his club's building, a weird, Rubik's Cube-shaped structure called Eastus. The place was basically a storage hub. Need gestured for Sharon to follow him inside. As they stepped in, Sharon spotted someone scribbling complex equations. It was Haruki, the same guy from earlier, now deep in calculations. The scene rewound to the moment Sharon first stepped into Eastus. Need gave him a quick rundown about Eastus's origins and its bizarre capabilities. Eastus was filled with fake rooms, perfect for stashing things where no one could ever find them. The moment someone discovered a hidden item, the entire structure would shift randomly. In other words, it was the ultimate hideout, impossible for anyone to crack. Then, Need revealed the real room, his research club's actual headquarters. The club was called the Science of Supernatural Spirits Research Room. Sharon just stood there, completely speechless, unable to process what he was hearing. As the door creaked open, dust flew everywhere, making Sharon cough uncontrollably. Inside, he spotted Haruki hunched over a chalkboard, scribbling down some insane calculations. Back in the present, Sharon couldn't believe Haruki had joined a club that actually believed in supernatural nonsense. But Need shut that down fast. Haruki was only here to disprove the supernatural. Haruki seemed thrilled to see Sharon, greeting him like an old friend. Then, out of nowhere, he launched into a rant about atomic properties. Sharon just stood there awkwardly, thrown off by Haruki's randomness. Haruki kept going, explaining how splitting an atom's nucleus could unleash enough energy to wipe out a city. Sharon was horrified. People would die if that actually happened. But Haruki just brushed it off like it was no big deal. Sharon grew even more uneasy and reminded Haruki about a mage's true purpose. Haruki taunting him. Mages couldn't harness that energy, not that they wouldn't. Sharon's expression turned serious. He wasn't having it and shut Haruki down hard. But Haruki kept pushing, saying he only cared about facts, not ideals. Fed up, Sharon turned to leave, but Need stopped him. He had no idea how to navigate Eastus alone. Need then scolded Haruki for taking things too far. Haruki admitted it, but only because he saw Sharon as his rival. He'd done it on purpose. He told Need to remember what happened during the teleportation competition. For someone who'd just learned teleportation magic, Sharon's calculations were insane. To escape the dragon maze, Haruki estimated Sharon had split time into 10,000 fractions. Need went pale. No Class 5 student could pull that off. Haruki agreed. No normal mind could process things that fast. Then he asked Need what he thought. Need finally got it. Haruki was testing Sharon's limits, pushing his calculation skills. His plan is to provoke Sharon into competing in the speed gun tournament. The next day, inside the Academy's lecture hall, students buzzed about the speed gun matches, wondering how Sharon would score. The speed gun test was a practical magic exam. Hit every target with a precise spell. Targets multiplied with each level, and participants had to clear them all before advancing. But Sharon, in typical Sharon fashion, awkwardly confessed to Professor Sienna. He didn't know any active magic. Professor Sienna joked about his grades not being high enough to learn combat spells. Then she dropped the truth. Sharon already had magic at specialist level. Sharon was completely lost. But then he remembered his photonization theory from the teleportation event. He still doubted himself. Light magic couldn't attack. Professor Sienna handed him 2 books on advanced light magic research. Sharon's eyes lit up. This was his first real shot at active magic. But after skimming the theories, he slumped, even more convinced this was useless for the speed gun test. Professor Sienna patiently explained, light magic could work in the tournament. This branch of magic had been extensively studied, and top mages agreed it had insane potential. Mastering it meant Sharon's growth would be limitless. Finally, he agreed to learn. Later, in the training area, Chiron tried casting light magic, but failed. Again and again. He couldn't believe he was struggling this hard, at his level. After a moment, Professor Athela greeted the students dressed in full church attire. The students freaked out seeing Professor Athela's ridiculously elegant appearance. Even the oversized glasses she usually wore were gone. Chiron's classmates explained that Professor Athela was actually a famous bishop who guarded one of the 12 holy artifacts. There were only 12 bishops in the entire world, and she was one of them. Need, completely swayed by Professor Athela's beauty, immediately switched sides and became her supporter. For today's lesson, Professor Athela planned to teach the students how to strengthen their omnipotence. She invited a senior from the graduate class to demonstrate a spell called Kotodama. Kotodama was a power-boosting spell that relied on words. First, the senior casually unleashed a basic tornado spell. Without even chanting, they summoned a crazy strong tornado, leaving the students totally impressed. They all praised the senior, amazed by the sheer power of their magic. Next, the senior demonstrated Kotodama by pulling out a small book from their pocket. He started reading it like reciting incantation. The students were mesmerized by their smooth, captivating voice. But the chant dragged on so long, the students got bored and started dozing off. Finally, after what felt like forever, the chanting ended and the senior unleashed another tornado spell. This one was way stronger than the first. The force was so intense it nearly sent the half-asleep students flying. The spell wasn't about the words themselves, but the intent channeled through them. Still, he admitted that long chants weren't practical in battle, so he decided to show a shorter and stronger version. With intense focus and determination, the senior began chanting again. This time, the words were completely gibberish. Nobody could understand a thing. But the senior looked way into it, and seconds later, a massive tornado erupted, sending everything and everyone flying. The unprepared students got knocked around like flies, crashing all over the place. Chiron was blown away by the senior's insane power. Professor Athela thanked the senior for the demonstration. Since Kotodama was a specialized spell, she had no plans to teach it to the class. Instead, she introduced a similar technique called sequencing, strengthening omnipotence by counting numbers with full concentration. Chiron was curious how counting could have any effect, while the others were confused why numbers even mattered. Professor Athela explained that numbers were deeply tied to the spirit zone, but the real key was the intent behind the counting. She demonstrated, starting with numbers in the tens. A few seconds later, she hit the hundreds. Her spirit zone visibly expanded. Then she skyrocketed to 400, 1700, 2400. Chiron couldn't wrap his head around how someone could count that fast. Finally, Professor Athela hit 10,000 in no time, her spirit zone swelling to a 40-meter radius. Just with sequencing, her spirit zone had quadrupled in size. Unlike Kotodama using visual aspects, the trick here was pure focus and mental speed. The faster the counting, the stronger the spirit zone. Not just in range, but in power, accuracy, and intensity too. Chiron started getting it and wanted to try it with his light magic. Of course, sequencing was useless if the caster didn't have enough mental strength. Chiron stood frozen, trying to count as fast as possible. In just 1 minute, he hit 1,000. Meanwhile, the other students struggled hard. Their mental stamina was nowhere near Chiron's, who'd grown up as a commoner. Chiron suddenly realized he'd accidentally used sequencing before, back in the dragon maze. It clicked. He could categorize numbers in hundreds and count them in chunks. Determined, he stretched out his hand to test it. A blinding flash of light burst from his palm, shocking the entire class. Chiron panicked, totally flustered by how ridiculously flashy his light magic had become. The students started buzzing with discussions left and right, guessing Chiron might use photon output for the speed gun competition. Professor Athela began keeping an eye on Chiron's progress. Her curiosity piqued. She greeted him, suspecting he'd finally managed to put sequencing into practice. Then, she invited him to test it out inside the image zone. After giving him a quick rundown, she told him he could start whenever he was ready. Chiron closed his eyes, focusing hard as he ran the calculations in his head, his mind sharpening. Soon, he summoned the targets, tiny winged orbs popping up everywhere. He had exactly 1 minute for the speed test, the standard time limit for the competition. Activating his spirit zone, he aimed his hand at the targets. His first shot landed dead on, hitting the mark perfectly. Sharon was stunned by his own magic. Finally, he'd reached this level. He took down several more targets, getting into the rhythm and speeding up. The other students were shocked. Light magic was that fast or precise. Professor Othello realized he was using sequencing by grouping large numbers and calculating them outright. Sharon kept firing at the speed gun targets, so fast it almost looked like he was aiming and shooting at the same time. When the trial ended, Sharon scored 342 on his first attempt. He let out a sigh of relief. This meant he could join the speed gun competition without any major issues. Need gave him props, but Iruki just mocked his sloppy score. Iruki called it trash, though he also admitted Sharon was kinda interesting. Raising his hand, Iruki asked Professor Othello for a turn. Flashing a cocky grin, she gave him the go-ahead, but warned him not to mess around. Sharon shot him a skeptical look. He wasn't a fan of Iruki's attitude, but he was still curious. Iruki activated his spirit zone without hesitation. Then, he shifted it into deviate form, something totally unexpected. The other students were shocked. This wasn't normal at all. Iruki summoned the targets and get ready to start. His spirit zone darted toward them at insane speed. Just like that, he wiped out multiple targets in one go. His movements were smooth and effortless, like he'd done this 1,000 times. Sharon couldn't help, impressed by Iruki's insane display. Their eyes locked. The rivalry between them was heating up big time. Iruki cranked up the speed even more, leaving the class in disbelief at how strong he really was. Sharon figured Iruki was also using sequencing, and Need confirmed it. Except Iruki wasn't calculating in thousands, but millions. Sharon froze, trying to process that info. No way a human brain could handle that. When the minute ended, Iruki's final score was 548 points. The other students were kinda salty that he'd been hiding his skills all this time. Even Professor Othello was surprised. The troubled student turned out to be a genius. Iruki strolled over to Sharon, locking eyes before asking what he thought. Sharon admitted he was blown away. He never expected deviate form to be used like that. Iruki kept egging him on, making the whole class side-eye his weird behavior. Then, awkwardly, Iruki explained he used a logarithmic system and decreased the unit. That straight up shocked Sharon. Those calculations were practically impossible without a calculator. Iruki smirked and threw down the gauntlet, daring Sharon to beat him. Sharon fires back that he learned magic to improve himself, not to crush others, but Iruki called that a weak excuse. Iruki told him to drop the idealism if he couldn't back it up. It's really not convincing that finally got under Sharon's skin. He'd prove his point by taking Iruki down. Iruki just shrugged, smirking as he compared Sharon's understanding to a worm next to his own calculations. Sharon was fuming at the insult, while the other students could feel the tension in the air. Something intense was about to go down, and they were all here for it. Sharon stared at the scoreboard, his eyes locked on the average class score of 400 for the Class 5 students. He knew hitting level 30 was the only way to reach 700 points, his goal. Stepping onto the training arena, Sharon braced himself, ready to push his limits. As soon as practice began, he swiftly shot down every target with his light magic, moving like a blur. His speed was insane. It almost looked like the targets were disintegrating on their own, leaving his classmates in awe and showering him with praise. Even his classmates noticed how much he'd improved. He didn't even need to look directly at the targets anymore. When time ran out, Sharon's score flashed. 567 points, way above the class average. He was exhausted but satisfied, wiping sweat off his brow with a small grin. The other students cheered as Sharon walked off the arena, basking in their admiration. His eyes flicked toward Iruki, silently declaring he'd beaten his score. Iruki just laughed it off, standing up like he was about to show Sharon what real skill looked like. With total confidence, Iruki strolled onto the training field. And then, he went all out. His deviate form shrank, making him even faster. He zipped through the targets, obliterating them in seconds. After a minute, the scoreboard lit up. 568 points, just 1 point higher than Chiron's. That's when Chiron realized this 1 point gap wasn't a coincidence. The next day, the same thing happened. Another 1 point lead. And the day after that. And the day after that. The crowd went wild, chanting Aruki's name like he was some kind of legend. Chiron finally accepted it. Aruki was still way out of his league. Back in class, everyone was hyped about the Chiron versus Aruki rivalry. Some students even started fangirling over Aruki, inviting him to join their clubs. Meanwhile, Chiron was getting frustrated. He had no idea how deep Aruki's skills went, while he was already giving it everything he had. Noticing Chiron's scary expression, Need tried cheering him up, promising to support him. Chiron groaned, saying even eating felt like chewing on numbers at this point. Need shamelessly sympathized, but the spectators loved it. They were betting Chiron might actually break the high score. Chiron suddenly asked Need who held the top score, catching him off guard. Turned out, the record holder was Chiron's own girlfriend, Amy, with a crazy 987 points. Meanwhile, Amy sat on a bench, clearly waiting for someone. Soon enough, her best friend, Sherelle, showed up. Sherelle frowned, concerned at how thin Amy looked these days. Amy just laughed, saying Sherelle would look the same if she moved up to the graduate class. They casually chatted about the graduation exams. Amy admitted it wasn't hard, but they tested every single aspect of her abilities. Then, out of nowhere, Amy asked Sherelle how Chiron was doing. Sherelle was shocked. They hadn't seen each other even once this whole time. After Sherelle filled her in, Amy finally understood. Aruki had been provoking Chiron on purpose. She remembered Iruki pulling the same crap with her back then. Sherelle wondered if Amy was going to step in and help Chiron. Amy found that hilarious. Chiron didn't need anyone's help. Back at the arena, Chiron barely managed to hit 700 points, gasping for air like he might pass out. Aruki walked over, congratulating him with a smirk, calling it a decent score. Amy, meanwhile, was confused why Chiron was so desperate to win. It was just a test. Sherelle rolled her eyes, pointing out she'd surpassed Aruki. Amy shrugged. She never competed with Aruki because she ignored his taunts, but she admitted she'd probably lose if they actually went all out. Sherelle couldn't believe what she was hearing. And sure enough, Aruki's score was still 1 point higher than Chiron's. Chiron felt like crap. He was barely standing, while Aruki looked like he hadn't even broken a sweat. For the first time, Chiron felt hopeless, like he'd never win. Chiron carried that crushing feeling of defeat back to his room, shoulders slumped. School was about to go on a 3-day break, and right after the competition would officially kick off, he couldn't figure out how to beat Aruki, no matter how hard he racked his brain. Memories flooded back as Aruki's harsh words echoed in his head. His mind replayed every past moment, every humiliation, every accusation, even watching his parents powerless. The times he'd been underestimated, blamed, or straight up ignored. Nobody ever truly believed a word he said. Chiron sank into deep thought, realizing Aruki wasn't entirely wrong. The world didn't listen to the weak, and just like that, a flicker of determination reignited in him. He sat down to meditate, searching for a new way to push past his limits. Numbers, their true meaning, swirled in his mind. What was the essence of sequencing? Manual calculations wouldn't cut it. He needed something deeper. He let go of rigid formulas, trying to envision something bigger, something fundamental. This wasn't about counting anymore. It was about feeling the numbers, testing how far he could go. In his subconscious, he raced forward aimlessly, no destination in sight. Then he hit an invisible wall, its surface rippling like water. Curious, he prodded at it until, without warning, cracks spiderwebbed across. It shattered, revealing a pitch-black void beyond. Chiron jolted back to reality, heart pounding with an unfamiliar dread. It felt like a dream, yet part of him was weirdly drawn to that darkness, like his body wanted to be pulled in. But he realized something beyond numbers themselves. 3 days later, at the joint training facility, the Class 5 speed test was about to begin. 2 students already in position, seniors and juniors crowded in, eager to watch. Cheryl showed up too, planning to report Sharon's performance back to Amy. Sharon's friends, though, felt the pressure. Seniors were definitely here to size them up. And let's be real, everyone wanted to see the genius showdown. Iruki versus Sharon. Cheryl's friends debated the winner, but Iruki had always dominated. Cheryl disagreed. Sharon still had a shot, and she believed in him. The competition rolled on, winners declared round after round. Finally, the main event arrived, the last match everyone had waited for. Iruki and Sharon stepped into the arena, tension thick enough to cut. Sharon's usual nervous grin is gone, just pure laser focus. Professor Athela gave them both a pep talk before things got started. The screen flashed yellow. The match was about to begin. Then red lit up. Both unleashed their spirit zones instantly. Targets exploded under their insane speed, neither holding back. The other students could only watch, too stunned to even whisper. The scoreboard is dead even. Neither was backing down. Their concentration was next level, way beyond what normal students could handle. Iruki shrank his deviate form, trading precision for even more speed. Cheryl's friends were impressed, but Cheryl herself started worrying for Sharon. Professor Athela used her spirit zone to analyze their match. She openly acknowledged Sharon's relentless hard work, the kind that had brought him this far. Meanwhile, Iruki couldn't help but secretly admire Sharon too, though in his head, he just thought the guy was downright insane. Sharon's focus sharpened like a blade, and the moment a target appeared, he obliterated it without hesitation. Professor Athela was seriously impressed by how Sharon could calculate so fast, like some kind of human supercomputer. That level of skill is only achievable by someone who'd pushed their mental limits to the absolute edge. But one slip in concentration, everything would fall apart in an instant. Sharon cranked up his focus and speed even more, like he was racing against his own limits. His score skyrocketed, leaving Iruki behind. The crowd couldn't believe their eyes. The students erupted in cheers, rallying behind Sharon like he was the underdog hero of the hour. Iruki realized Sharon had entered some kind of mental doping zone. He was betting everything on this moment. Iruki respected that level of madness. It was the same brand of crazy he lived by. Out of nowhere, Iruki pulled off a move nobody had ever seen before. Something completely unexpected. Just like that, his score shot up, blowing past Sharon's like it was nothing. The students tried to make sense of it. Sharon wasn't slowing down, so how was Iruki doing this? Then Cheryl figured it out. Iruki had 2 spirit zones. Now 2 glowing orbs circled Iruki's body, annihilating targets at an insane speed. This was a special condition only Iruki could pull off, thanks to his savant syndrome. Cheryl finally understood what Amy had meant earlier. Everything clicked into place. The twin spirit zones danced around Iruki, wiping out targets. Sharon's score was now hopelessly behind, and the students started writing him off. Still, they couldn't help but be in awe of both of them. This was next-level stuff. Sharon himself was drowning in frustration, feeling the weight of defeat creeping in. He'd given it his all, or so he thought. But Iruki's ability was on another plane entirely. At least he could say he'd fought with everything he had. Or had he? Sharon suddenly rejected that thought. No, he hadn't truly gone all out. Fear had held him back. He didn't know if he should step into this dangerous territory. But he was about to risk it all anyway. And just like that, he crossed into a dimension beyond numbers. Professor Athela froze. Something felt wrong. A blinding flurry of light erupted, annihilating every target simultaneously in a flash. The glow grew so intense the spectators couldn't believe what they were witnessing. From a distance, Sharon looked like he was wielding some kind of large-scale magic. His score exploded, rocketing up to challenge Iruki's lead. Iruki stayed confident, convinced his calculations would outpace Sharon's last-ditch effort. 5 seconds left. Both of them poured every ounce of energy into those final moments. Iruki started struggling. Those 5 seconds stretched like 5 brutal years. Then the buzzer rang. Silence hung over the arena before the crowd erupted in cheers. Iruki collapsed, drained. It was over. His eyes flicked to his score, 1247. Not bad. Not bad at all. Then he glanced at Sharon, who stood eerily still, like he wasn't even there anymore. Sharon snapped back to reality when someone called his name. Sherelle frowned, worried by his blank, expressionless stare, but she still congratulated him. He'd won, setting a new record with an insane 1253 points. The students swarmed him with praise, though Sharon just looked confused. Iruki suddenly marched over, accusing Sharon of cheating with that large-scale magic stunt. Sharon panicked. Yeah, even he had noticed the whole arena lighting up like a fireworks show. But Iruki just laughed, messing with him before admitting defeat and shaking his hand. Class 5 students gasped, since when did Iruki ever concede publicly? Hell must have frozen over. Sharon brought up Iruki's earlier comment about human lives mattering more than research. Iruki clarified, the explosion was just energy. For it to be a crime, someone had to be behind it, and the person controlling that energy who carried the blame. Then Iruki dropped a bombshell. He needed Sharon's help. From today onward, Sharon would be responsible for keeping him in check. Sharon was frustrated because, in his mind, Iruki should have cleared up the misunderstanding from the very beginning. But Iruki had intentionally stayed quiet. He wanted to see Sharon's true nature, to test what kind of person he really was underneath. He needed to know whether Sharon was someone who'd exploit the explosion's power or someone who actually understood the risks behind it. He knew Sharon had been pushing himself to the limit, training relentlessly just to beat him. And still, Iruki trusted Sharon. He believed that if things ever went too far, Sharon would be the one to stop him. The other students thought that was a ridiculous thing to say. But Sharon understood exactly what Iruki meant. Sharon realized that Iruki was afraid he wouldn't be able to control his own descent into madness and end up bringing disaster to everyone around him. Sharon made a quiet promise to Iruki that when the time came, he'd be the one who stopped him. The other students were completely lost, unable to follow the weight of the conversation, while Need, on the other hand, was deeply moved by what he'd just witnessed. Need felt incredibly proud to call himself a friend of both Iruki and Sharon. Suddenly, Professor Athela called out to Sharon, her voice unusually serious, breaking the moment. Sharon followed her to a quieter area, unsure of what was coming. Professor Athela panicked, jumping to the conclusion that Sharon was trying to leave this world, something that left Sharon completely confused. The place he had entered was one that could make a person vanish completely, without a trace. Sharon apologized, genuinely unaware that the location was so dangerous. The mages referred to it as the immortal function, while monks often called it nirvana. Of course, Sharon was stunned when he realized just how close he had come to the void. The place Sharon had seen was a dark, endless void, an immense empty space that seemed to stretch into infinity. That empty space had felt like it was pulling his body in. Sharon woke up from his dream, just like he had every day since that incident. This same dream had haunted him daily. And the strange sensation he kept feeling was starting to make his body feel unstable. He'd consulted Professor Athela several times, but each time, he walked away with no answers. When he arrived at the club, Sharon slumped onto a sofa, admitting that lately, he felt like he was being haunted. Iruki and Need couldn't believe what they were hearing, especially from Sharon, who had always mocked the idea of ghosts. At first, they assumed he was joking. Even Iruki couldn't help to tease him a little. He tried to analyze what was happening to Sharon, connecting the dream to something resembling outer space. Sharon remained skeptical. How could he dream about a place he'd never actually been to? But Need disagreed. He'd heard something like this before. There was a recorded experiment from 200 years ago where criminals were subjected to electric currents inside a metal chamber. He woke up a month later, suddenly knowing accurate details, names, locations, information from places he'd never visited. The theory was that the soul, broken apart by the electric waves, became ionized and transformed into electromagnetic waves. That eerie, chilling sensation the criminal described was what people later called a supernatural experience. An ionized soul could trigger quantum phenomena, allowing someone like Sharon to transcend space and time. Once inside the quantum realm, a new world with entirely different laws emerged, one no longer bound by conventional time. And assume if the soul's weight was lighter than an electron, then the laws of space and time couldn't touch it. That's why Sharon could sense the vastness of space in his dreams. Sharon was impressed by how precisely they were able to explain it, even if it was just a hypothesis. Still, they felt proud of themselves for being able to help. Then, Aruki told Sharon to be honest. He'd sensed something off about Sharon's magic during the speed gun competition and hoped Sharon would finally open up to them. After a moment of hesitation, Sharon finally told them about the immortal function. Need had never heard the term before and turned to Aruki for answers. Aruki didn't respond. He just stood there, silent, lost in his own thoughts. Then, suddenly, he burst into loud laughter, finally understanding why he had lost. He remembered his father once telling him that the immortal function was a domain every mathematician dreamed of reaching. At the same time, Aruki felt a strange pride, as if it were an honor that Sharon had to go that far just to beat him. Touched by how genuinely his friends wanted to help, Sharon decided to officially join the Supernatural Club. This made Need and Aruki absolutely thrilled, welcoming him with open arms. With both of them by his side, Sharon felt confident they could uncover something entirely new. Need then pulled out an official club registration form, ready to formally register their group. After that, Need suggested they celebrate, insisting he'd treat them all. Professor Thad was seen grabbing a stack of research club registration forms. Professor Sienna noticed Thad dropping one of the forms. She checked it out. Apparently, Thad knew about this research club. The form listed Sharon and Aruki as members of the Supernatural Club. Suddenly, Sienna's expression turned downright creepy. Meanwhile, at a large mansion nestled in a serene forest, Professor Athela greeted Professor Sienna upon her arrival. The two enjoyed some time together and started discussing Sharon. Sienna reported that Sharon had joined the Supernatural Club, which shocked Athela. Sienna was seriously worried. That club used to have a terrible reputation. But Athela brushed it off. The troublemakers had graduated and were replaced by Need, a diligent and well-behaved student. That wasn't the case at all. Need was lazing around on a couch. Sharon was baffled seeing his friends skip class. Aruki was busy playing chess against himself. Sharon gave up on his lazy friends and decided to study instead. Aruki, wanting to mess with Sharon, he told Need to bring out his research project. Their conversation piqued Sharon's curiosity. Eventually, he couldn't resist and went to take a look. Back with Professor Sienna, she brought up Aruki's history of causing trouble. Aruki pretended to be weak, but he was actually a monster, and Sharon had beaten him. These two could become serious threats if they went down the wrong path. Sharon might end up being the Academy's biggest ticking time bomb. Athela thought Sienna was overreacting, but nope. Need had actually created a magic bomb. They were totally planning to use it for a big spectacle. Need specialized in mechanical magic after all. Sharon tried on a transparent cloak Need had made. Then he noticed a book and picked it up. Inside were pictures of popular female students at the Academy. It was research from a secret club run by graduation class. Amy was one of the targets listed in there. Sharon turned bright red and scolded them for having something like that. Professor Sienna, now aware of the secret club too and wanted to shut it down, along with the Supernatural Club. Athela understood Sienna's concern for Sharon. She could tell Sienna genuinely cared about him, so Athela decided to share a secret about Sharon had achieved nirvana during the speed gun competition. Sienna's face went pale. Pure terror and shock mixed into one. Back at the hideout, a massive tremor suddenly shook the place. They told Sharon to immediately hide their stuff. Aruki knew a professor was invading their base. Sure enough, it was Professor Sienna. They forced Sharon to act naturally and stay seated. Then they pretended to casually chat like nothing was wrong. Right then, Sienna burst into the room. She saw Aruki and Need staring at her calmly. Even Sharon, who'd normally greet her, stayed silent this time. Professor Sienna wasn't happy at all about the lack of a proper welcome for her. Need faked professionalism, claiming he hadn't had time to prepare a welcome because her arrival was so sudden. Professor Sienna and Need got into a bit of an argument, making Sharon even more uncomfortable with the whole situation. Tired of the nonsense, Sienna cut to the chase. She wanted to shut down their research club. Their calm, professional attitudes instantly turned into full-blown panic. Need obviously protested Professor Siena's decision and demanded an explanation. After Professor Siena pointed out their club's lack of results, Need immediately bowed and begged her not to go through with it. Need swore he'd do anything in return. Professor Siena agreed, on one condition: they had to kick Chiron out of the club. They were shocked to find out Professor Siena was targeting Chiron specifically. She knew about Chiron's past encounter with the immortal function, something even the Academy couldn't properly handle. Chiron promised he wouldn't do it again, but Professor Siena's real concern was overflow. Iruki had experienced it himself at age 8, a condition only geniuses faced. Overflow happened when the mind couldn't process the flood of information after awakening. Plenty of kids had fallen victim to this mysterious phenomenon simply because no one understood it. Chiron finally realized what he'd been going through. The signs had been there all along. The same torturous dreams kept haunting him, driving him to the edge of madness. Professor Siena offered to take Chiron for mental therapy, telling the others not to worry. But Need still refused the idea. Siena couldn't just make unilateral decisions like that. Iruki backed Need up, insisting Chiron should be the one to decide. Need also found it weird how far Professor Siena was going for Chiron. Gathering his courage, Need straight up accused her of having feelings for Chiron. Surprisingly, Professor Siena didn't deny it. She just confirmed it and wanted to take Chiron away. Need wasn't having it. Teachers shouldn't be crushing on students, period. But Professor Siena, in her usual blunt way, said anything was possible. Why not? Need, half joking, asked if there was any chance she might like him instead. Professor Siena shut that down hard. 0% chance. No feelings whatsoever. Need's heart shattered at her brutally honest response. Iruki believed Chiron wasn't that weak. If he couldn't handle overflow, then he just wasn't cut out for it. Besides, Chiron wouldn't die from overflow, so there was no need to go to extremes. And since Chiron was the only one who'd entered the immortal function, Siena's help wouldn't change anything anyway. Iruki outright said her concern was way beyond normal. It was an obsession. Chiron finally spoke up, agreeing with Iruki that he should be the one to decide. Although he felt like he was losing it, but at the same time, it was exhilarating. This phenomenon was part of him, and he wanted to uncover its secrets with his friends. He wasn't running away. He'd learned to deal with it. Siena was reminded of someone who looked just like Chiron. Realizing she couldn't force things, Siena backed off. But they still had to show results if they wanted to keep their club from being shut down. Need, who'd just started looking relieved, immediately turned pale and passed out. And just like that, the three of them ended up sitting in the Academy courtyard, brainstorming their next move. Their club had never actually presented anything before. Nobody could even prove the supernatural existed in the first place. Out of nowhere, Iruki spotted a beautiful woman. Need perked up instantly and turned to look. Turns out it was Professor Siena. Need decided to tail her, hoping to dig up some secrets or weaknesses to use against her. Iruki suggested using Need's invisible cloak for spying. The two of them rushed back to the dorm to grab the cloak. Meanwhile, Chiron was assigned to follow Professor Siena carefully. Professor Siena was being super cautious, like she didn't want anyone following her. All three of them sensed she was hiding something big.